Must be nice.
He feels guilty now.
All right.
He's guilty.
Let's not stop picking on Dustin because he'll eventually listen to it.
Yeah, we should stop picking.
Yeah, we'll have to stop that. We would like to go on, of course, but we have to stop it. Okay, let's start. And I start with giving the papers back. And we have Nicholas, Budimir, the first paper.
You're Dustin.
So I went through here. I don't really have to discuss everything. What is it there? What is, and reach a state in which they can imagine what might be, and so on. So this, of course, what the critical theorists are all about. I just wrote about Adorno today. He had this heart condition, and then he fought against what? He fought against the return of brown fascism and red fascism, and against the overwhelming positivistic attitude, which is the metaphysics of what is the case versus that what ought to be or what could be or what should be, and so on and so on. So I wrote something about the positivist attitude here. And so I think for all the papers there, it is important to be materialistic, which means to look also at the objective movements of capital, for instance. So what has happened last year and this year, because that changes all what these critical theorists have said so far. And so if we talk about jazz, and that's what Dustin did, to connect jazz with class struggle, with the class situation and where the class struggle is at this moment. And so jazz may be good at one period and jazz may not be so good in another period. Where somebody belongs, Kant, for instance, belongs in the Restoration period. That means after the bourgeoisie got into power and was not interested in social dynamics anymore, but was now interested in social statics. And that means that also this is reflected in culture. So the revolutionary music of Beethoven and Mozart and so on, after the bourgeoisie won, that is a completely different situation for this music. And now it becomes classical, it becomes something historical. It's putting into a shrine now, it's something holy, and it is above history, eternal values and all this. That happens to revolutionary writings and music and literature and so on. So that means every piece of literature, every piece of music, every piece of philosophy has moments in the superstructure, has to be related to what is going on in the base structure. So that's from Walter, who wrote about Weber, Max Weber. And so a statement like, to breaking out of the iron cage, the breaking out and the words and all that belongs into a particular situation where Weber lived. That means particularly after the First World War, he had, years in which he was mentally decapitated, and the German government paid him anyway, in spite of the fact that he could not teach. His neurosis was so overwhelming. I don't know how many years it was really, but then he came out of this and he became very creative again. But Walter's paper, and I think you said something about Weber too, it is important, where he stands. He's on the bourgeois side. He participated in the Versailles Treaty. He was one of the members of the German delegation which went to the thing there in Paris and undersigned. I don't think he undersigned the Versailles Treaty, but he was one of the consultants in the whole process. So, but where does Weber belongs to a bourgeoisie which has to defend itself, which has become counter-revolutionary 100 years after Kant, and which has to defend itself now against the Fourth Estate. That means in the next group of revolutionary. And so therefore he did the theoretical job for the bourgeoisie, namely to prove that the superstructure, base structure theory of Marx was wrong, that not only economic factors decide, but also cultural factors are decisive. So for Marx, when something happened in the base structure, feudalism to capitalism, that was reflected in the Protestant ethics or the Protestant Reformation. That was the theory, but it was not the Protestant Reformation which produced capitalism. It was capitalism which produced the Protestant Reformation. Therefore, he wrote his whole work there in order to show that also culture in the Protestant Reformation was causative, was a cause or could be a cause. Now, it is true that the older he became, the more he rescinded that again and emphasized, the overwhelming power of the economic factor rather than the cultural one. But his whole life project, is embedded in where the bourgeoisie was at that time. So it was a time when the First World War, of course, was this horrible disappointment. By 1900, the bourgeoisie was on the peak. They had this evolutionary theory, and they thought they were in heaven now, science and technology and all this. And suddenly comes this catastrophe, 10 million people dead, all capitalist countries run against each other, beat each other up for their colonies and so on. So now he belongs to the losers. So inside of the bourgeois camp, the conflict had taken place, and some of these bourgeois states had lost and others had won. In reality, they all had won. They all had lost in a certain sense, The nobility plays a role. In the First World War, they did not have a Nuremberg trial because the nobility still held on to its solidarity. So the kings of England came out from Hanover, and so they were all cousins. The Emperor of Prussia was the cousin of the Queen in England, and so on. And they knew that if something happened to the cousin in Germany, that would be bad for them as well. And so therefore they would not put any of their nobility on trial. And therefore they could not have any trial at all, because the nobility, that was the opposite for to a large extent. Now a bourgeois like this fellow there, Fritz Haber, he belonged to the bourgeoisie and he was a Jew. Therefore they wanted to have him and they wanted to have a trial. But then the German bourgeoisie did not give him up, because he was the captain of industry, and he belonged to them, so they were solidary, and while the British and the Americans and the French wanted to have him, they made him a hero of the nation, and he went on with his industry and produced insecticides, we said, and including Cyclone B, which was one of the insecticides with which his own countrymen, his own Jewish brothers and sisters were killed. So it is this, to see, when we are in the intellectual business, we of course, are inclined to overemphasize, thinking and all this. But to be materialistic, and Adorno has emphasized that, means to put the main weight on these things there which happen against our consciousness, or in any case independent of it, and very often against it. And the example, of Bush there is fascinating in that sense, because he suddenly noticed, or he said, I was told, that the whole thing was going into the bucket, and so therefore he was forced by the issues outside to act against whatever subjectively his family and practically his whole class had been thinking and is still thinking. So between, where did I have this example? Somebody, when somebody suddenly becomes dean or whatever, somebody moves into a higher position and suddenly has power, there Marx would say, being changed, and then that changes the consciousness. As soon as somebody, goes into another position, suddenly the way he was thinking is all turning around.
One of our sociologists is now the bargainer for the administration.
Yeah, which bargainer?
What was that union?
Huh?
Against the so one of our sociologists is now the chief administrator.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know that. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, there is this problem, and I think all the people in the union know it. I will go there tomorrow again, and I was, I'm the founder of this thing together with Arthur Fogg, and so I've stayed there for years. Yes, I mean, she, sometimes you have this, that somebody is a union leader and then drops out and the administration picks him up and he becomes some kind of a position, and you see that his consciousness or her consciousness changes. I just can't remember now. There was some case where I said, here it is again. So being and consciousness, being consciousness and being and materialistic. One definition of being materialistic means to emphasize being over consciousness. It doesn't mean that you underestimate, the so-called subjective factor or so, but the emphasis is on this. So this here's Herbert Marcuse, that we put him into this context too, and with Max Weber, what is paper that we do that too, that sums up both of them. And then we had another one, we had Weber, 2 papers on Weber, right, and we had one on Adorno with jazz, and there we have the whole thing. I think one can, and then, what was it? It was Adorno, and then we have also the Iron Cage, so we have Weber twice, and then we have Adorno, and then we have Marcuse. So that is one thing, that we see those guys, in the context, and that means the critical theorists themselves. There is some criticism, you did it maybe, or
I did some criticism.
Yeah, some critique, for instance, that they are too abstract. You become necessarily abstract if you don't have any footing in society, I mean, they were all bourgeois. The ancestors, Calverti, Adorno, that was his mother and his aunt, they were relatives of Napoleon, they came from Corsica, and somehow Adorno had all kinds of strange inclinations for the nobility, Some of his girlfriends, with what you go around, they all had that fond, the nobility title fond of them. It is very strange, but in reality was, of course, a bourgeois, the son of a Jewish wine merchant who did very well, at the Main River there in Frankfurt, where I land all the time. So he belonged to the bourgeoisie, had deep inclinations for the nobility, and had no contact whatsoever with the proletariat or the precariat. I don't think he knew, who they were, where they were, or whatever. I told you my grandfather, was a streetcar conductor, and he was in the streetcar which went between the Institute and the Opera House in Frankfurt, back and forth all day long. And that was the streetcar which they took, But my grandfather had no idea who they were, and they had no idea or interest, who my grandfather was or how he lived or whatever, So, and this became particularly increased, when they were in America, and the reality was that the proletariat did not rise against Hitler, who belonged to the low middle class and represented the upper classes, betrayed, was an employee of Krupp and Thyssen and Ford and the Herren Club, and the workers followed him. That was a horrible shock for the whole theory, it has to be. And it was reflected, namely that suddenly they said it doesn't go to alternative future number 3, the realm of freedom and the realm of necessity, but it goes to number 1, and that is the one-dimensional thought, one-dimensional man and woman. Your criticism was very good. They have nothing to do with women either, because it was the one-dimensional man. Where's the woman, And so this sexist type of a language which became very strong in the 70s and 80s, and also in religious circles, God always was E, and so they didn't know what to do with him and made her she too. So they, there is the women's protest against him. The topless 2 women who danced around Adorno's lecture hall. They had a course to do that too, and so that means they had no contact with the proletariat, and whatever they had was estranged when the workers did something else than what they were supposed to do, according to Marx. But that is in Marx himself already. There is a difference between the young Marx, who's very humanistic, and then the old Marx, who wrote the Capital and had become somewhat rough on and maybe authoritarian in a certain sense too. Particularly after he went to, in 1848, went to Frankfurt and was so horribly disappointed. He thought the bourgeoisie would ally itself with the workers instead of that the bourgeoisie allied itself with the nobility. It was a horrible shock, And some of you say something about predictions, or that they think things come earlier and then they don't come. You have that at the moment with the so-called post-secular society of Habermas. A post-secular society means all these people, Nietzsche and so on, God is dead or whatever, they were somehow a little bit premature. Marx was always premature. I mean, like religious sects, he thought, well, next year it will come, or 10 years from now it will come, and then it didn't come. Right? So theory has to be continually confronted. And I would say also in the religious studies, I said, religious people have completely to continually be confronted with the reality which is happening. When you go to these services on Easter, they were beautiful, but they're all hermetically closed up in themselves. And what is really happening outside, there were groups, they were singing, it's all right, and they think that 50 times or whatever. It's all right, and absolutely nothing is all right. 2 wars lost, and the whole economy breaks down, and they think it's all right. But they are not even noticing, how peculiar that is, that they say these things in the liturgy, or we are redeemed or whatever. There's not a trace. This is the most unredeemed society ever. And so, why, how does that happen? That the consciousness can somehow cut itself off so tremendously from outside. And this is true, in terms of self-criticism of the critical theorists. They must also continue to say, where are we standing now? And maybe, the role of the intellectual, the nonconformist, is much more humble than than they assume sometimes. Today I went to the elevator and I had to go to the 4th floor. I didn't even know there was a 5th one, but there was a 5th one. So I always talked with the people in the elevator. So there was a colleague of mine who was there and said, well, David, where are you going? It's the 5th floor. He said, I'm an economist. And we are on top of the world now. I said, we rule the world, we economists. I said, shit, you ruined the whole thing. Look where we are now. And then I said, well, I go to the 4th floor. I'm a religiologist. I'm more humble than you guys are there. And so then he wished me a good day, but he was rather depressed after the whole short discourse which we had with each other. So nevertheless,
discourse or a war? Is that a war or a discourse?
It was the discourse. We didn't have enough time to develop any further. Everybody was friendly then, but a little bit baffled, I think. Okay, so that as far as the Herbert Marcuse thing is concerned. So and the others too. You bring Trotsky in and Zizek and Habermas. So in all that, a very simple sentence, that the truth has a time core. And, the Trotsky was at a certain time, the 20s, and Zizek is now, and Habermas is now. And so, in the meantime, capitalism and the capitalist society has moved. And so, one cannot say, well, Hegel did that once. He wrote his dissertation about the planetary system, and he proved that 7 planets was exactly the number which it had to be according to God's logic. And then the same year they discovered an eighth one, and he said, too bad for nature. If you want to define what idealism is, then you can say that too bad for nature. There shouldn't be an eighth one. There was a great mistake for nature. So he also, when there was any type of a creature, frog or whatever, which didn't fit into the Linné type of a system, then he would always say, too bad for nature. Or these were twisted type of creatures which were not really fish and not really land animal, or plants, half plants and half animals. He blamed nature for all of this. There was nothing wrong with the logic of God or of Hegel, but there was something damn it wrong with these creatures there who couldn't make up their mind if they were plants or if they were animals or if they were human or still animals or whatever. It was nature's fault. Okay, so well, idealism of course has produced great things, but I think the materialistic critique is justified. So, and I think we have to apply this, what I just said, to all the concepts, like false needs, for instance. In these concepts, there is the whole world is hidden there. I think I gave the example of Odysseus, who found that primitive guy with one eye, and he was not differentiated enough. So he had natural needs, eating and drinking and so on. But then Odysseus had to give him needs in order to hook him. So who produces the false needs, who accepts them? And Marcuse talks about quasi-biological things. That means needs which capitalism gives us and which are entirely artificial and the false on top of it, but they become as powerful as natural things which are given with our organism in terms of sex and food and so on. So they can have the same force and can determine us. This sentence there, as Marx said, the ruling ideas are the ideas of the ruling class. It's one of those sentences. The question is, what is still true of all of this? So if truth has a time core, then the longer it goes, the less things will be truthful. And that is for the New Testament as well, When the book of Revelation says, I'm coming soon, the time is short. It says now it's up to 1,000 years. Obviously, it doesn't become truer, the whole thing. It gets more untrue at the time. Every Sunday, every Easter becomes more untrue, So how where that comes from, that one fixes things, particularly when they talk about eternal values, beauty, where Adorno came from, there's this big opera house. I went in that opera house during the American attack on Frankfurt, and the opera house burned up right above my head. I had to crawl out, out of the basement while it was burning, and I was on the way to the airport in order to fly and to attack those guys, but I was stuck in that opera house down there. And on the opera house there is written, to the beautiful, to the truth, and so on and so on. The bourgeoisie had at a certain point to believe these eternal values, but there they were all burning up, So there was another one that did. Adorno's friend, he protested against building the Goethe house up again. Goethe house had also been bombed to pieces, and then there was the question, should we rebuild it again? And so they did rebuild it again in order to build a facade that really nothing had happened, and that everything was all right, and that the World War was just a little intermezzo, and now it's over, and now we have Goethe again, and so on. So everywhere there is this combination of being and of time and these ideas there. It doesn't mean that one has to be nihilistic and say, there are no valuable ideas, of course, but they are, but they do have that time core.
Where do we get this idea that truth has a time core? Is there a particular, is this Hegel, is this, it's obviously
Hegel would say philosophy is the reconstruction of history in thoughts, reconstruction of history in thought. So that means from there come issues like time diagnosis and time prognosis and so on. So it comes out of the idealistic situation. And that again, Hegel is the greatest of the idealists, but he's also in the transition. So Marx did not just arbitrarily put Hegel on his head. Marx could put him on his head already because he had put himself on his feet already. That's why he could put him on his feet. So you see texts which Walter Benjamin took up, for instance, look for the kingdom first and everything else, clothing and food and housing, will be given to you. That is the idealistic message of Jesus. But Hegel already had turned that around and say, look for clothing and food and housing first, and then the kingdom will be given to you. So he had already put himself on the New Testament, also on its feet. And this is taken up, by the liberation theologians, and that is why so many of them were killed in El Salvador and Guatemala and so on, because Christianity, as long as it's idealistic, is no danger whatsoever. But as soon as you put it on its materialistic feet, justice now and so on, then hell breaks loose. So that in spite of the fact that these 6 Jesuit priests who were murdered in Romero and so on, that they are not communists, they just wanted, that the Jesuit has to study 2 things, 7 years theology and then 7 years medicine or economics or whatever. These 6 were all economists. So they knew exactly, how the economy worked. I mean, the coffee production particularly, and how many sacks people have to produce and how much money they get for this, and how long they can live from that money which they get, which is only at a certain time in the year when they can do this, So, and because they went down there, therefore they made these demands, that the capitalists had to increase the wage from 75 cents, maybe to $1 or $2. But that brings down the surplus value. And all the people in the School of the America, the terrorists whom we educate there, and to go into the villages and kill 10 here and 10 there, and so they terrorize people in not organizing. Because if they don't organize, then they cannot make any demands to increase their salary. And then the surplus value doesn't come. If the surplus value goes down, that is the falling of the profit rate. And that is the death knell of the capitalist system.
This is what the Ku Klux Klan did in the South, right? And union organizers.
Right, yeah, exactly. That is the same principle. So this is what Marx called the being versus the consciousness there. And not, singing there is all right, and you forget completely, what's going on out there. So, but turning it around so that, that this consciousness reflects this, what is going on outside. Now, there is this mirror epistemology, which the critical theorists do not accept from Marxism, There's a primitive Marxist type of epistemology, which means our consciousness is only a mirror. Obviously, it is more than a mirror. There is creative imagination. We can not only reflect what is the case, but we can reflect what is possible in what is the case. And so it is possible that with this mirror theory that Marxists become positivists and thereby ruin their whole thing, because everything rests on that they are not only seeing what is the case in capitalism, but that they see also the potential which is present in capitalism. I told this to my students all the time. I'm very optimistic as far as the American or the Slavic nations are concerned. I think that I'm pessimistic about the capitalistic skin in which we are caught up at this moment, and we have to change the skin. We have to crawl out of this and get into a new one, and so on. So I'm very optimistic about the snake, which will make its way. I'm very pessimistic about the skin, because when I fly over Russia or whatever, and here, what have these people done? They haven't done anything yet in comparison with Rome or Babylon or Greece or China or India or whatever. They have not made history. They have just procreated, and they have just read the Bible and eat and so on. But that's not making history. So therefore, I think that the evolutionary potential of the American, both continents, and Russia, including the Asian part, that is immense, and that not China or India or Germany will move to the front. They will move to the front after they have stripped themselves from these skins which strangled them. And so therefore one can be pessimistic about what is the case, but one can be optimistic about the evolutionary potential which are in there. And I think one should tell the students both, and not only one part of it. Okay. Then people to work in the social society of yours. It's very good. So I think What I just said is true for all the papers, and the papers are very wonderful. They concern the current order and its legitimate paths to action, and so on. So very good. You thought that they should have learned a little bit more from Trotsky. And the main issue with Trotsky was, of course, that he had a very true element there, and that it comes true now, really, namely that socialism in one country is not the right thing, but that it has to be international. Because if it is just done in one country and the rest remains capitalistic, they can, kill it off. So that has been proven. But now what's happening now is after the capitalistic system was globalized, now also the opposition becomes global. And that would be the issue which, a Trotskyite could, say we are moving in the right direction now because of the globalization of capital as well as the globalization of the working people. Now, there it would be necessary to lift up the people's consciousness, that they don't make demands on their government now to give subsidies and cut them off from other markets. Our export rate, has fallen, and it, the balance between import and export, in normal times it would have been all right, but at the moment it shows that we are not producing enough, And so there is a temptation that people want to be self-sufficient and cut themselves off from other markets, and that would be a danger for all of them. So both now, the correction, the crisis is global, and the corrections must be global. And so then consciousness must move along these requirements. So the Europeans demand now in the UN that we will have a regulation board under which all the nations will be subordinated. And there is right away, of course, here in this country, this rebellion. We don't give up our sovereignty, we'll have our own business and whatever. Now, the UN has no police force, to force us, but what will force us is the market. That means if American corporations will not subordinate themselves under that board, they will lose. So, if you make idiotic nationalistic things against Cuba, we only lost. We were not able to get rid of the communists, and all our businessmen would have wonderful business in Cuba. Now it dawns to them after 50 years how idiotic that was. So, nevertheless, these are all learning steps which have to be done now, and they are not one-sided. That somebody comes, Hegel says, don't prescribe what should happen. You always come too late. That's right. So you have to see where the thing moves independent of our wishes, and then cooperate with that movement. Then one knows what the next step is. And then you see also how important you are, because Marcuse is dead after all, and Weber are all dead, these guys. So, but the historical process moves on, and your consciousness is still alive, so you are in contact with that, and with what all they have worked through there, the categories can be very helpful now, but they have to be newly applied to what is happening now, because they had not hoped that the Soviet Union would collapse, and they did not think that we would collapse so fast, They thought this capitalistic thing would go on and on and on. And what this Marcuse and whatever they can help us now is, for instance, to see that, as you said already, two things Americans do not see. They do not see that the bailing out and the incentive, that this is a euphemism for federalization and nationalization. Sometimes the right, because of their hate, makes them particularly sharp in seeing things. So they shout, then, this is socialism. Sometimes they shout, this is fascism. And in that they are true, too. There is really this alternative. It will either be fascism or it will be socialism. As Marx said already long ago, it will either be socialism, it will be barbarism. And, of course, fascism would be a new, horrible barbarism. So therefore, on one side, what they have worked out in terms of logic and categories, may have sound for us now no longer of actuality and so on. But that does not mean their category is useless. because they may help us to see new things which they couldn't see yet because simply they had not happened. In terms of contemporary analysis or test or whatever, to look at every moment which is going on. So what we had in the Indian Ocean there, it's a little incident, but to analyze that with the categories which we have and to see things which the press wants to repress. Yesterday they reported that there were these 4 guys there and 4 terrorists and terrorist pirates, and these pirates took over that ship, and then the captain gave himself up so that his men could go, so they took him on a little boat which they stole from the ship, and now they were sitting there. There was no gasoline in the damn boat, and it didn't go anywhere. And in the meantime, the whole American fleet was collecting around them. It was a little tiny little boat, and there were these huge cruisers and with torpedoes and rockets all around them. But then they wanted to negotiate. So one of the 4 pirates left the little ship and went to one of the American warships in order to negotiate. And what happens? 3 SEALs were underwater, shoot all 3 on the boat. That is, of course, a violation of international law. Wherever you have negotiators between 2 armies or between labor and capital or whatever, slowly we have evolved that negotiators who come with a white flag and so on, that they are honored, recognized. Not because we are particularly virtuous or so, but because we know what the revenge is. So I talked with Jania when that happened 3 days ago, and then we knew exactly what will happen now. They have 250 hostages on land, and right away, of course, they will shoot 4 of them sooner or later, But then they have, in the meantime, in the last 2 days, they have attacked 4 American ships. So that means the lex talionis comes in. If you don't treat people in terms of golden rule, then the repercussion is that right away the lex talionis set in. So then that means when they attack, then of course we have to attack again. So Mrs. Clinton said today now that we will make all-out war now. So she comes back now because they just attacked 4 of our ships in the meantime. Just so fast these things go. And they go fast because these are little fishermen, stupid little fishermen, who cannot fish anymore because the fish are gone. And then on land, they are unemployed because of the horrible disorganization. So, and there is a central position in London which organizes these things, which are high-tech people. That means they know exactly where the ships are. They know exactly where the warships are, so that they can avoid them. So they went 350 miles outside of the land positions because that's where they were relatively secure in terms of policing forces and so on. So it's a huge organization, these pirates, with workers, and they make the money, the millions of dollars with one ship, and then they get part of this, and the rest goes to London, and then, feeds those organizations. They get like the mafia, a global type of organization. So, nevertheless, when the reports came, they didn't really tell what was happening concretely. So they, surrounding of the ships and all that. Said, but come to the point, call it by its name and so on. And they didn't get to it. They always turned around because they knew that they had committed a new crime, an international crime, and that this crime, will have repercussions now. So I think that a critical theory can help us to break through this illusionary or delusionary type of a thing, this repression of essential things that they don't get the whole story. And in that sense, it can be very helpful. But you see, it's not the theory on which the accent lies. The accent lies on the happening. And that theory will ultimately, rise for a time, which provides people most adequately with the movement in contradictions. So that is what it is, a movement in contradictions. There are we and there are the terrorists, and it goes back and forth now. And we shoot one of the negotiators, and they will shoot the hostage, and so on. And then we will, of course, send new forces, and we'll shoot them again, and so on. And you have to wipe them out completely, the other side, if you want to stop that lex talionis. That's another thing. And if you have millions of them, whatever the other side is, you can never wipe them out. And therefore, this hitting and counter-hitting back and forth is infinite, takes no end. You see, between Israel and Palestine and so on and so on. It can go through centuries.
That's the Somalia situation struck me as particularly sad, since nobody mentioned the awful conditions that people let go for almost 20 years, 1990 maybe.
But you see, we have a grievance too, because our soldiers were so badly treated. They were dragged through the streets, and so, what was it, 25 Marines or so were butchered there several years ago, So, and they remember this now, and so then this back and forth.
How many civilians did they shoot in those streets? 300, I think.
And Walmart just overfished that area and wiped out the small little fishermen.
Oh, is that the connection?
Yeah.
The fisheries for Walmart?
Walmart and most of the large grocery stores in the United States, it was just loaded with fish. A beautiful place.
Oh, I think that's the connection. Oh,
and they overfished the daylights out of it, and they did it over the last 20 years, and now they have no occupation. So the piracy has been going on for like a decade, because you just go, there's only like 20 people on one of these large ships, throw up grappling hooks, go in, take them, say, all right, want $1 million, and the company says, you have our $1 billion vessel here. Sure, we'll give you $1 million. Go away. And it's been
or $500,000 or less.
Well, it's been going on for a decade. Now it's something to talk about in the news.
Right. Now, it's good then, of course, and that's part of the critical theory too, to remember now, what has happened before, where people like we now, again, so these guys have attacked 4 ships in Leicester, so now we have to do something and so on, where we had 2 incidences in the Second World War. One was this Dresden thing, where they bombed 3 times the same city, and just a butchery, and the American Air Force flew a 4th attack in the morning and strafed the fields and killed the people in the trains and in the farmhouses and so on, a horrible type of butchery. And then Hitler thought one should cancel the Geneva Convention, That means the others are so bad, now you can be bad. That is another mechanism. Most of the time when we get bad, we are bad because we go against somebody who's bad. So, but, by shooting this guy, by shooting these 3 guys, we came practically as bad as the pirates are. And that means, even this increase. Immanuel Kant has a long story about this, how, that when something bad happens, that you are very much tempted now to act badly against that, and then, the both of them are circling into the abyss in a certain sense. And the only thing where reality then breaks through is that the generals said to Hitler, you can do that, of course. That meant that he would have killed all the American and British pilots in his camp. There were thousands of them, And but then the general said, the Americans and the British, and they have also 10,000 of German prisoners, and they will do the same thing. And that is usually then what brings somebody, to makes him sober again. And with Churchill was the same thing when the V number 1, V number 2, which means vengeance, by the way, which was the vengeance for the bombardments of the German cities. You see this back and forth. And so then Churchill said we have to put gas into the whole thing. And after Fritz Haber had invented the gas war, the mustard gas and so on, all nations agreed to a Geneva Convention that gas would not be used. And up to 1944, nobody had used it. And then Churchill suddenly wanted to give the order that it be put into bombs. They should bomb Germany with gas. And then the Admiralty, it was a struggle of 2 weeks or so, said this was not a very good idea because, the SS Colonel Werner von Braun, who brought us to the moon, will put gas into the things. Or they didn't know how far Heisenberg was with the atomic bomb business. They put atomic material into the head of the rockets, and then all of southern England will be gone. And so it wasn't done, So, but I mean, these are the objective processes which are going on. And if the critical theory is taken seriously, then it disciplines thought in such a way that it remains continually in contact with what is happening. That's why I tell the students always to do that time diagnosis. Our students since the 60s are very much separated, abstracted from these things. They were discouraged, They had hopes. They wanted to have new religion, new politics, new love, and so on. And they were shut at Kent State and Mexico City, and so they moved into themselves and their own private stuff. And, the other side, the objective process got lost. Okay, very good paper, wonderful. That is for Nicholas. Then we have here, and we covered the others to some extent too already, Herbert Marcuse, that's Elizabeth, one-dimensional man. So, that one very simply captures this guy and say, what do you mean with one-dimensional? And from the paper, it looks as if one-dimensional means when the critical capacity of people gets lost, when there is no real opposition any longer. So we have only two liberal parties. We have only two bourgeois parties. We have Trotskyites there in Detroit, but they cannot really talk so people understand what they mean, and small little Marxist groups and so on. So, but otherwise, we are in a one-dimensional situation already, and if there are critics, Kellner and so on, they do not really, or McCarthy, they do not really come through in the public discourse, or it remains, some kind of ivory tower, something of intellectuals who talk with each other. And so also with Marcuse, I think what made him popular was that he immediately took on one of the neoliberals, that means Reagan. So he had these public discourses with Reagan in California, and he also attacked him from Paris and all this. So that played a role for, he was really not only a theoretician, but he went into practical politics to some extent. Also tried that and built a political party. So they are very much aware of the theory, praxis, dialectics, all of them.
Why do you think that more academics today don't do stuff like that, get actively involved in popular politics?
Yeah. Also this is a time thing, when the critical theory finds itself under fascist conditions, it would be revolutionary. If it finds itself under liberal conditions, it is more in the rescuing business, That means they would say the liberal society gives us a chance, to see that we rescue some of the aesthetical values, some of the religious values, and so on. And so, you could ask me why I was with McGovern and I was politically active, and since that time I wasn't, because you have to have something outside in this objective situation where you can connect yourself to, I could connect myself, and I never will regret it, with McGovern. And I was the campaign manager here for him in his third district twice, and even today I think it was a wonderful idea. But otherwise, later on, that chance never came, Now, under Obama, maybe that chance will come back again, So this, there's this issue of the kairos, which Paul Tillich emphasized, and there was a kairos movement after the First World War. There is a certain, kairos means originally from the New Testament, my time has not yet come to go up to Jerusalem or to do whatever. So there are people who know that there is a certain time in which one has to act, and one cannot act when this time has not come. So in the Jesus story you have that very often, why don't you go there and sin? And he would say, my time has not yet come, but then 3 days later he goes because the time has come. Although there the construct is, or the idea is that there are some people who are called who know in a certain situation what the will of God is and what has to be done. And Paul Tillich was horribly depressed because the fascists had the same idea. They also talked about the kairos, and Hitler was for them the great phenomenologist. The phenomenology is on the right, so he was the great phenomenologist who also knew the moment when one has to act. So he had know the moment when to attack Poland. You have to, the real moment. So when you negotiate with somebody, you have to know the psychological moment when your opponent is weak. And so the guy from Czechoslovakia there, Hitler shouted him into the ground and he got almost a heart attack. And he called his doctor in to give him some injections or whatever. Then Hitler said, but don't make him too healthy now, then he will not accept the deal which I have. He has to be a little bit sick for this. And so. But nevertheless, there is, when you ask why don't they do this now and so on, the question is, in secular terms, then that one knows now you have to act because that goes beyond the theory now. It's not only thinking now, but it's acting. And the same people who are good in theory may not be so good in action. The Jesuits, for instance, when they have a stupid Jesuit, then they will act all the time. Because if you have an intelligent Jesuit, he will think, what is for it, what is against it, what the consequence will be, and as he thinks back and forth, he doesn't act at all, So, but if you have a stupid guy who doesn't know what the consequence is, he just jumps into it. That is kind of activism. And we had that too, the students, and I warned them very often, without knowing the system adequately, they nevertheless had that urge, we have to do something. Something has to be done, So this activism is an action without any theory, and that's why the student movement and the critical theorists, got in trouble a little bit with each other. So, and our American thing is, it's better to act than not to act, but sometimes it's better not to act. And but Adorno, Guardini too, but Adorno emphasized that, the thesis against Feuerbach of Marx, philosophers have always interpreted the world, but it's time now to change it. Adorno would say, since the change has failed, maybe it's the time again to reflect on it. And so that one has a balance between thinking through and, when one has to act.
And then Zizek has repeated that now for our era.
The question is now, you see, there is the Tea Parties now. That's an initiative from the right. The right will not play dead. They lie the blue from the sky. It's horrible. These Fox people, they get more idiotic every night, But so they will not lay down, and so the question is now, has the time come for the left to act now, because you can miss the right point too, and can say later on, well, that was the time when we could have acted, and see it too late, I think that the left, has to get together and see to what extent Obama can be supported. Now, when they see today that he earned last year $2.5 million, they will say he's not our guy. He belongs to the black bourgeoisie. There's a very small black bourgeoisie, and these are not our people and whatever. So, but people like Kerner and all these groups, their books are full of critical theorists here and in Europe, and so they would have to find a way, to see when the time comes where they. There is this thing, this program there which helped very much to bring Obama in this, it's online there. What is it called?
Something.org.
Oh, yeah, right, something like that.
MoveOn.org.
MoveOn, yeah. George Soros paid for it. George Soros paid also for Obama, from the very beginning, millions and millions he put into that campaign. And he obviously had the right instinct for it. But, that's a very good point about action. But, is the time here now to act, or do things have to get worse before they get better, or whatever? I could imagine, that an initiative could be taken in order to enlighten people about that this is a euphemism and that federalization will go on and that it will never come back again. That means that an attempt, to stop the federalization at a certain point would only throw us into another crisis. It is not clear at the moment if Obama is maneuvering. That means if he knows that the people are not educated and therefore he must give them that hope we could return to the free enterprise system again, and so on. Or if he really believes that. And both of it is possible. It's possible that he really believes he can, stabilize the whole thing, and then we can have the free market again and so on. Then he would himself be caught up in this illusion. But even if you want to do an initiative, would it be good now to take, one of our television stations and do that enlightenment work and say, look, Americans, we can never go back there again. Because if after 4 years we would, deregulate again, we would go into a deeper crisis, and in that new crisis, the trillions will not be there anymore from the government, nor will China give us another trillion and so on. That means we will have a deeper crisis and less means to pull us out. So therefore, the federalization has to happen now. That means all the banks and so on. You know that Roosevelt had no plan whatsoever when he said the New Deal. People today have the impression, he knew what he was doing. He had no idea what he was doing. What he did was he put people together in his cabinet from the right and the left. And he had people from the right who were mass murderers, capitalists who had shipped their workers in a train into the desert and left them in the desert to starve to death. These were people he had, Douglas or whatever his name was, on one side. And on the other side he had these people who would say, spend. And so today they would talk to Obama and would say, you have to spend much more, and much faster in order to, in productive part, and Henry Ford would have said that too, to not Wall Street, but to put it into productive capital, not speculative capital, and so on. So, that is what he has to do. That means spend more. But what does that mean? That means federalize everything. And now some of the banks, say we want to pay these billions back, but they can't pay back. That is all, that means that all expresses the hope that one can get back to the status quo again, which was there before 1981. That means before Reagan began to deregulate. So these are all these objective status to which I would like to have the critical theory bound. So whatever we learn from these people, it has to be brought and confronted with that what is going on day after day. And how does one get to this? I mean, they lie all the time, but you can see through the lies, you can reconstruct the timeline. So if you get the little fragments, critical theory has to do with fragments, you can see what happened in the Indian Ocean. And you do not repress that, first of all, this is a bunch of criminals, of course, but in order to fight them, we became criminals ourselves. And that this, since there is no court, nobody would take us to court, but the objective movement itself will mean that they will take revenge, and then we will take revenge, and so on and so on. So that is the objective process to which we have to somehow connect ourselves. Okay, so that is Elizabeth, and what do Positivism, I put something here.
Yes, no, I did.
The proletariat, this word proletariat, see, even if you take one word there, that's what Marx used, and it was an old Roman word, and it had something to do with proles, with the children, the people who had most children. You see that this all has become untrue, because in the 60s, the capitalists put the workers on the pill, and since that time they produce ones themselves, and that means every marriage has about 2.1 children. So the word, the original meaning of the word has become wrong. It was still true up to your grandparents or whatever. Just look back, they had still 5 children, 6 children or whatever, and your parents have 2, and you will have 2, and so on and so on. So, but another thing is the so-called proletariat does not want to be called proletariat. So can you call people and address people, dear proletarians, unite yourselves? So they will not be happy with even how you address yourself to them. So therefore, what are we doing with this word? And the Europeans have replaced it by precariat. That means people who have a precarious type of an existence because they have no income or are unemployed and so on, precariat instead of that. But this is a strange word too. You cannot get that through. It would not be accepted for quite some time. So what one does with words, I think, is an important thing. Then there's something here about negative thinking from contemporary societies, what Marcuse calls negative thinking. Let me just make that clear for a moment. Hegel was a positive dialectician. What does a positive dialectician mean? It means the negation of the negation equals affirmation. So you have something negative, you negate the negative, and the result will be that there's something positive. All the European thinkers, up to including Hegel, were all positive dialecticians. Then comes this experience which the critical theorists had, the old ones and the young ones with whom we are concerned. What has happened? Second World War, catastrophe. That was the negative. Now the negative was to be negated. It was negated. The Nazis were slaughtered. The Nazis lost in Japan, in Italy, and in Germany, and so on. But this negation of the negation, what did it lead to? Did it lead to alternative future number 3? Did it lead to the new world order, a good one? No, it led to the Cold War. That means, the capitalistic and socialistic struggling with each other. That means from there, from this objective process, comes the experience and the change from a positive dialectics to a negative one. That is Adorno's book, Negative Dialectics. That's Marcuse, not so much from, and so on. So negative dialectics, what does it mean now? You may negate something negative, but there is no guarantee that the result will be affirmative. See, this goes even in terms of dying, in terms there is something negative. And the question of Adorno in this metaphysics and so on is, does there something remain of this guy? So the negation, is it abstract? That means, is there nothing or whatever? Or is there something more than nothing? And there are all kinds of, in literature, music and so on, attempts to rescue something from the religious doctrines of Pharisees and Christians and so on and so on. But there is for them no guarantee that the negation of the negation will be something affirmative. They may say it is probable that who was this great, who wrote this thing still, Adorno has all the time, but I could pick it up, but it doesn't matter. So, but nevertheless, there is a guy who, Anatole France or whatever, dies, and so the question is, Anatole France is dead, but is he totally dead? Is he not totally dead, And then there is a strange leftover of the teleological and the ontological proof in the critical theory, which is very strange. So the writer argues that Anatole France, had somehow this longing for being good or for doing his work as an artist and to repeat again and again when it failed, but he was always aiming at something in spite of the fact that that good thing or that kindness is not part of the empirical world. It's not part of what is the case. What is the case is people that are damned unfriendly and animal-like and so on. So where does that come from? Which drives a poet or whatever, like Anatole France, to pick up again and again and do that good thing which does not come from this world. So it must have come from somewhere else and was written in our heart and then drives us always to that, what they would call then the totally other. But where is that coming from? And therefore it is true that Anatole France is dead, but is he totally dead? Question mark, and there is a probability that he is not totally dead, and so on. So that is the only thing what is left over, So the other thing, when you see the Christian thing, there's a death, and then there is a negation of this death, and then there is ascension, to the right hand of the Father. There's the affirmative. And the affirmative is, for the believer, a certainty, So the whole Western civilization is negation of the negation equals affirmation. And what Adorno now introduced is the negative dialectics. There is still the negation of the negation because the fascists were really conquered in the Second World War. But there was no affirmation. The affirmation was missing. And this experience, that the negation of the negation did not work, is then reflected in the theoretical work. That means the theoretician has to be open toward that movement which is really going on there. They could not go on with the European thinking that the negation of the negation leads to the affirmation when it was so obvious of a worldwide scale that the Second World War did not lead to the affirmation, but that it only continued the thing, and then comes, after the Cold War comes the war against terror, and God knows, if not that in the Indian Ocean, there is the beginning of something else now, that maybe not terrorists but pirates instead of whatever. Yeah.
Rudy, does this, I don't mean to make it too simple, but does this sort of show why critical theorists were kind of, in addition to their maybe bourgeois character, kind of at arm's length to the workers' movement? They kind of thought, this old stuff, the old proletarian revolution or whatever, that's still the negation of the negation. Does that kind of explain that they're...
I mean, what they were disappointed of is that the workers should have made a revolution, and they should have taken Hitler out together with his employers, but they didn't. So it's something else, namely that the negative was not even negated, that they did not even have the will or the power or the courage or whatever to take it on, I mean, now again, at this moment, at the moment, the American ruling class is in a very weak position, There's a lot of anger out there, but the anger could be directed against them now and say, you are at fault, and so on and so on. But nobody's really doing this. And what people are doing then, they're killing each other. Every day, there is a son coming in, decapitates his 5-year-old sister, The guy goes into an office near New York, and shoots 13 people and so on. Day after day. That means what we had under external colonialism, we have now in terms of internal colonialism, that the victims who cannot direct their anger against those who are responsible for everything, direct it against each other and kill each other off. And I mean in many, many ways, where somebody makes his marriage partner into the object of his anger because he's unemployed. And then they ask the stupid question, why did this guy kill those 13? After they had said before, he lost his job and he got poor and poor. They have the motivation. And they have the motivation and ask for the motivation. I mean, the blindness, of this is unspeakable.
They don't accept the motivation.
Huh?
They don't accept the motivation.
Yes, they don't accept it, right. But that would just be another trick. So
he should have found another job.
Yes, pulled himself up by his bootstraps and the rest of that nonsense. Because, what do we make in this country?
yeah,
If you want us to buy something, we got to have a job to make something. Otherwise, we got no money to buy with.
Elizabeth, that's for you. Thank you. Very good work.
As long as we don't build anything, we have no money to buy anything.
Yeah. Okay, but what the people are in the radio station and so on, they are in the business of apologetics now, of course. And when we are in sociology, this Kant and Spencer and so on, sociology, and Parsons, that's all apologetics, of course. That doesn't mean, that Parsons or whatever, that they didn't work out a wonderful system and that there's a lot of work going into this and statistics and so on. But a fundamental motif which rules every speech act, is the apologetics of the system, So when they say, he's unemployed on one side, and then they say we don't have the motivation and so on, they don't accept unemployment as the motivation because that would hit at the system, which does not give him a job, and not only him, 3-4 million, or it's 9% now, and may go into 11 or 12 or whatever.
It's 12 in Michigan, it's 8.5.
Different states.
Numbers are supposed to
the average one is 9%. But, like in the churches, that's where the word comes from, apologetics, You make the Crusades, you kill 10 million witches, you kill the Jews and so on, and you are still apologetical. and say that is the one true church and so on, comes from God or whatever. So something similar goes on in the secular world, That means the system is sacred and has to be defended. And then the non-conformist intellectuals don't buy into that and say, the system moves, the system has to move, and so on. And the difference, is not that these apologetical sociologists will not do social change. We know that they study social change, and they sometimes, like Kramer and so on, they try to do social change, but it is inside of the system with the purpose to stabilize the system. That means even the social change thing is apologetical. So, this is now the case, this is the fact, You could even argue from the conservative side, what else, what else do you get? That's the only system we have. So let's improve it. Let's improve the presence, Let's improve the traffic or whatever, anything. Because you cannot tell us what the inversion of that system would be. You say with Marx, that this system is the inversion of whatever is human. You could even say why people are so terrorized by their death toward which they go is because they look so similar to that death while they are still alive. That means they are so damned reified that when death approaches, they see that their life was reified and that it was not really living. That means Adorno would say, life does not live. And they don't even see it, But in a phenomenon, like when people move towards their death and then also they had not expected it, always comes the unexpected, always comes from outside, that it is a process which comes from inside as such, is not even thinkable. So all death is somewhat accidental in spite of the fact that everybody has to die. So this, all that has something to do that if you suddenly discover, that you have not lived, that you were not autonomous, that you were heteronomous, that you responded continually to requirements which were really foreign to what was really going on into your, you had to conform to it. So
there's the conflict I see, and I don't know how does one, and like in our current system, if you see the problem as a system, and yet you don't see access, so you support Obama and what he's doing. But in reality, what Obama's doing is trying to save the system, and you're sort of conflicting with how do you address that?
Always we have to, the critical theory gave up systematic thinking because whenever you begin to think systematic, even with great systematicians, for instance, Hegel or, Schelling and Fichte, we have not even received in this country. Nobody knows about them, but Kant or whatever, because when you begin to think systematically, you separate yourself from the events, And so the issue is, it's not so important that we have a closed type of a thinking system and everything fits or so, but you start with anti-Semitism or whatever, an issue like this which destroys all systematic suddenly and overthrows everything. So therefore, look at little things, what Obama is doing concretely, and from there we have to answer it now, He, tomorrow he flies to Mexico. Mexico City is the worst of all cities. Why he suddenly flies into this territory where they had hundreds of assassinations of officials last year or last month or whatever. I don't understand this. There's some things which I don't understand why he does that. He goes to an all-American meeting a little bit further on, but why does he have to land in Mexico City? Does he have a death drive or what? So little things like that. But something which is more, you have to go from moment to moment and not think, this is not important, this is not essential or whatever, which would be Platonism somehow, have these ideas. It is important to go down to these tiny little fragments. So he will close Guantanamo Bay, but suddenly you hear that there is a Guantanamo Bay in Afghanistan. And it is possible that they take these 250 people or whatever and just ship them to that thing, I have forgotten the name, but it's the same arrangement in Afghanistan. And they fly in people to Afghanistan from all over the place. So they catch somebody in the Indian Ocean and they fly into that. But the decisive thing is that Obama himself, I got it out of his own mouth, that he said the Habeas Corpus Act will not be valid for this camp in Afghanistan. Now, what does that mean now, Now, first of all, Bush had the same thing, The Habeas Corpus Act was not valid for Guantanamo Bay. But, Lincoln, canceled the Habeas Corpus Act. So you have to have always a historical type of a dimension, That means when the Civil War started, he canceled the Habeas Corpus Act, asked his general to march into Baltimore and shoot everybody who would resist without any court-martial or whatever. And so he did. And then the Congress was at home. He had no Congress. He governed without the Congress. The Congress came back 2 years later and affirmed the cancellation of the Habeas Corpus Act. So that means, that set precedence. That's a great president, He did it and so on. So Bush could say this already. And now suddenly the Obama says that too, by the way, he's the Supreme Commander. He gave the order in the Indian Ocean to take all measures necessary to do what, and what was necessary was that the SEALs would shoot all three of them, and that the negotiator would not be honored, There we have it already. There's somebody who wanted to change everything, and suddenly his hands are bloody, It is a human tragedy.
And if we, by applauding the small material things that he does, just take it, if he was closing Guantanamo Bay, and we applaud that as a breach to civil liberties, is that at that point are we not doing the same thing the positives are doing by being apologetic to the system, going, yay, we haven't really changed the system, but we did one really good thing. Are we not doing the same thing Parsons and Weber and these other people are doing?
I mean, so what you can say is, Guantanamo Bay was a violation, of the Geneva Convention and international laws and so on. There was a consensus, people visited Bush all the time from Germany and France, and they all recommended, please close this, please close it. So there is nothing wrong with that one does one thing. I mean,
but doesn't it make him a liar, right? If you close Guantanamo Bay and move everybody in it to the exact
that hasn't happened yet,
Yet.
What we know now is
for him to go after the Bush administration, which he hasn't.
Okay.
So that means he reaffirms the idea that the president is above the law. Him and Bush and all the rest of them.
But then you have to ask something else, why they have that in common, I mean, Lincoln did the thing of the northern states, of course. That means he obeyed the northern ruling class and helped to destroy the southern ruling class. He was a factor in this whole revolutionary movement, and then accidentally the slaves were set free. That means the proclamation for the slaves. And they were not free anyway. They still built the White House afterwards, and up to 1900 they built Atlanta and so on, as slaves or whatever. So here's the question, when they are coming with these good intentions, and then we find out they are doing the same thing like their predecessors, there must be some kind of a factor which they have all in common. And the factor which they have all in common is that they are not independent, but that they are the functionaries of the ruling class. That means that Obama has the same ruling class which Bush had, and which the others had before, up down to Clinton or whatever. And so they are not entirely free to go through with their agenda. And even if they had a good agenda, they would have to adjust it to the will of the ruling class. And the ruling class needs the oil in Iraq, and the ruling class needs the pipeline, which goes through Afghanistan, and which the Taliban did not grant the American government. So that was the reason why they attacked them. Besides the revenge, revenge alone would not have been enough probably, but the pipeline, which they did not allow us to build there, that was a thing. So what the ruling class has to say is important, and it is not open. So that means we are not privileged to hear the relationship between that ruling class and Obama, as the Germans did not have the privilege to know the relationship between Hitler and the Herren Club. They thought they had voted Hitler in, and Hitler did all these things because of his genius or because Providence had sent him or whatever. That means these people, represent somebody. The same people who paid both parties, they must have spent $200 million for the campaign on both sides, Where does that come from? Only the ruling class has that money, so they are paid, Now he has $2.5 million of 1 year income. They say, sold the books. Is it only the books, or did somebody pay him,
I want to restate your question.
My question was, how does one, we say positivists are bad because they're apologetic to the system. Yet we applaud Barack Obama when he makes small changes to the system, because he can change the system. But in applauding that act, are we not just applauding the same thing the positivists are doing, which is small changes to adjust the system with no actual real change to the system as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
So in fact what we're applauding politically is what the positivists are doing.
But now the positivists are not bad people, right? We wouldn't say that.
No.
Because also the critical theorists have to know what is the case, So in that sense there is an agreement, That means the positivists, the critical theorist may be interested in the potential in what is the case, but he does have to know what the case is, including also statistics where one quantifies what is the case and so on, So there is nothing bad about it, and we want to appreciate, the great work which they do in order to find out what is the case. And you have to think that this positivism was part of the Enlightenment. It was part of the bourgeois Enlightenment. If somebody could go to a bishop, and say, that is what is the case there. You say the trumpets blew and Jericho fell down. Jericho had fallen down, 1,000 years earlier already. So then, that was very progressive. The positivism, by simply pointing out what's the case against people who have illusions or whatever, it was once Enlightenment.
But the one and Horkheimer are very much saying that what Parsons is doing is wrong. Right? He's saying
they would say that what Parsons is doing is harmonizing. See, he harmonizes the antagonisms in civil society. That means he does fundamentally what religious people do when they sing all the time, it's all right, it's all right. So that's what they're doing, when it's not all right. So that means dialectical thinking zeroes in on the antagonisms which the right is harmonizing. And this harmonization of the antagonism, class thing, and so on, this goes into, they had just these Jesus movies there, and it shows that Tecton, for instance, what we call a carpenter, that this was really a worker who was below the farmers. He was somebody who had no farm or whatever, and he would repair the tools of the farmers. So that means the lowest of all things. What does Parsons make of it? He thinks Jesus was a low middle class guy, There you have it, because then that takes the whole revolutionary thing out of the New Testament. So these are all kinds of incidents where harmonizing takes place. But, Habermas was a good friend of Parsons, And so it is not that one thinks they are bad or whatever. One thinks, that this apologetics of a system which has so many injustices, that there's something wrong with this apologetics,
I think maybe we might even be using the wrong word. I don't think it necessarily matters that positives are saying the reforms are good. It might be the most problematic that even the so-called far left is saying, oh, what is Obama doing next, without saying, oh, wait a minute, he is a wing of a two-headed capitalist party. He's not the head of a Labor Party or a Social Democratic Party, or even though Fox says he's a Bolshevik.
Yeah.
I was surprised to find out.
I was surprised they knew how to, use the word in a sentence. Because
they didn't use it correctly.
The criticism with positivists is like they know how to use a ruler, and so they measure the length of everything, right? And the critique from the dialecticians is well, there's more than length. There's width, there's depth, and there's time, right? Because you can measure the plate across the top, and that's really great. Well, who the hell cares if you don't measure all the dimensions, and then that's going to be there now. Tomorrow it won't be there. Right? So the criticism against positivism is that, hey, you figured out how to use a ruler. Big deal, because it doesn't show it in time. All right? It's not, complete dismissal of it. If you run around and count how many Catholics, who the hell cares? If you want to talk about what is a Catholic, right, the different varieties of Catholics, how they have changed over the years, right, either by cohorts or by, decades. Now we're talking about something, right? But if you just run around and count how many Catholics because the guy says he's one, well, what the hell does he know, right? 6 months of catechism, or maybe he had some in high school, and now he's a Catholic, but never attends, doesn't teach his kids. Realistically.
Okay, Father, I want to come to your paper.
All right. Well, hold on, because the positivists, they're just doing what they're asked to do. They get a grant. Who does the grant? So when you're painting,
That's not what positivists are doing.
what are they doing?
They weren't just counting stuff. They were doing more than that. They're still doing more than that. They're talking about they're doing surveys on racism, trying to find ways to ease racial tensions.
Okay.
They're trying to. They're doing. They're not just counting. They are trying to.
Yeah, there's good. There are good ones out there. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
And Adorno, though, would say, if I'm interpreting this right, to say even they're wrong, though, because they're apologists to the system.
But he's using surveys all through authoritarian.
This is the contradiction. This is who are these positive?
In my opinion, in Adorno's head, it is that if you're doing surveys and everything else to change the class antagonism, that's a good thing. Anything else is just band-aid messages, endeavors. If you're not trying to change this system, right?
Then how do we? Because basically, I could then very easily say that that's what Obama's doing, is that he's doing band-aid systems and not trying to change the class
That would be
antagonism.
the case. Now we have to see what he is really doing, And one thing which I said already, we don't know to what extent he is maneuvering. That means where he says we have to do that slowly because, we have to turn the consciousness of Americans around.
What's the name of that guy? Krugman? Krugman? Paul Krugman? I don't know how to say his name.
I thought it was Krugman.
Okay, Krugman, right? He has been a fierce critic of the Obama administration, even though he helped put him in there. He said the banking thing was a whole disaster and everything else. So was he duped by Obama and his little team there, right? Or, would Obama say anything to get into power? Or is he biding his time because he needs those extra senators, like the one in, Minnesota?
Well, that's what I call maneuvering, right?
Right.
But, we will see what he does. On one side, you are right, where he says, well, we have to do that now in order to come back to the free enterprise system. In this case, system has been upset, and now it has to be restabilized. And that is the social change which Parsons knows. There are 2 forms of social change. One, when the system gets destabilized in the 60s, and then you make the attempts to restabilize it. So that may be one version. That's what he may really do, But on the other hand, when he says we have built this system on sand, he took the New Testament, the Sermon on the Mount, we have built on sand, and we have to see that we build it now on rocks so that it would be stable for a long time to come, That does not sound like going back again, because all what I said before, he must know that if he would, after 4 years or 3 years or 2 years, would be depolicing again and deregulating like Reagan did or whatever, it would plump, into deeper, because he said all the time, we have to see that this will not happen again, and so on, And he promotes, the World Board of Regulators and so on, it is not entirely clear at this time if he does A, that means to destabilize what has been destabilized, or if he will move out of this system and beyond that system. He is a liberal, he's a Roosevelt liberal. He knows that Roosevelt's New Deal did not rescue the capitalistic system. So that everybody peeps out of the television. So he must know this, that the war did it, And so if he does not get a war, a huge one, he will not be able to restabilize the system, So that is the context. We have to be very careful, Also with him, Roosevelt himself did not know what the New Deal was. It was slowly, and he was not for payments, and public works. Only in the process he was slowly convinced of this. And I think the same thing is true with Obama. I don't think that he knows everything, what he is supposed to do or what the plan is and so on. There are people with whom he meets every day, and I think that these fragments of a plan are somewhat shooting together, and that it is also changed continually and so on. So it is not so nice and pure, as one maybe wishes it, but it's a slow, very contradictory type of a process. But we will see, day after day it reveals itself, how many banks, he has obviously now put controllers into every bank, They have to come, that means these bank guys have to come to the federal officer and have to tell them what they want to do. And on that depends if they can pay back. They are not even free to pay back now. That means the federal government will decide if they have passed the test, the stress test. They have not even told them what the stress test is, So that means the penetration of the federal government into civil society is enormous. To the extent to which he pushes that, he does more than just stabilizing the system. And you can hear from the right, because they have the great sensitivity for this, So we do not know at this moment if it is just a restabilization of the system or if it is a qualitative change of the system. And it's the question if Obama knows it himself, or any of the thousands of people from the Democratic Party. And there are thousands of people who are in that Roosevelt tradition, and know it. And by the way, there are some true reports, every night where they compare the Roosevelt thing and the Obama thing quite in detail and quite scholarly, almost positivistic type of things, So what was the case then? And what is the case here? And to compare this, positivists can very well do this.
I think some of the things they said they were moving faster now than Roosevelt was.
Yeah, and more massively,
Well, it's past 8 o'clock. Let's take a small break.
Very good. So but I want to say something to you here.
Well, you can, when we come back, let me stop this here.
You want to give that here to Dustin?
If you want me to. Let's see how to turn this thing on.
Ahead of them, and they went from village to village, and then they built even a road along the ocean, so because the tanks couldn't drive on these high roads there. So they made a road down there in order to get to Dubrovnik. And on the way, the Croats didn't defend any cities. So they drove into the cities, took all the refrigerator and the television things out, and brought them to Montenegro and sold them on the black market. And then they shut the whole village to pieces, And so there was about 25 villages which they shut to pieces, and then the refugees came to Leo, and I had to go down to Argentina. That's how it happened. But then they came to the tanks finally before Dubrovnik, and they were proud that they had never been conquered by anybody. It was not entirely true. Napoleon came, and his general said he wanted to march through Dubrovnik and come out on the other side, but he got stuck in the city, So suddenly Napoleon's army was in the city, and they put the horses into the monasteries, and they made holes which are still there today to give water for the horses. So they were really there. The Frenchmen were really there. And so then the Serbs, with a loudspeaker, said to the Croats, "We want to liberate you from fascism." And of course they didn't want to be liberated, So then they sent one airplane, and this one airplane put a bomb on the electricity tower outside, and the lights went out, probably. So they came again, said, "We want to free you from fascism." And then, no. Then they put another bomb on the water supply. So now they had no light and no water in the city. And you know what the Croats did? In fact, they pulled up the bridge. It's a mold around it. There's no water in it, really. But put up the bridge so that they could not drive in. A tank cannot even get on the bridge. It would have fallen in there. And then they went with oil up there on the walls in order to put the oil on the Serbs when they would climb up on the ladder. I mean, a tank has to shoot twice, and there's a huge hole in the wall, and they could all drive through, I mean, a complete medieval type of mentality.
They actually boiled oil.
They boiled the oil and wanted to put it on them, and they have steel helmets, That would have produced the problem already for the oil, That would have gone down there on the other side. So, nevertheless, I mean, it was then the UN came in, and they really rescued it and divided them. So, the Croats were sitting on one hill and the Serbs were sitting on the other hill. So when the Croats were shooting at the Serbs and the Serbs were shooting into the city, I was standing in the harbor down there, and a woman right beside me was shot by a sharpshooter from the mountain. Beastly, the atmosphere when the phony attacks came, the fear of the people and the horror, in these old buildings, old basements, and was awful. I mean, you were just catapulted back 700 years, at least.
What was the discussion? How was this?
Dubrovnik in the 90s.
Okay, last word about the paper of Walter. Weber's key to the iron cage there, and so on. So it is about the whole concept of the iron cage. And here, of course, again, with words, and we explained already where Weber's position was, that he was on the bourgeois side, but some kind of a social democrat, and bourgeois type of a social democrat. And so
you're saying that, he argued that the Protestant Reformation caused capitalism? That's what you're...
Well, no, it was an attempt, that's important now, it was an attempt against Marx to... Marx thought the economic base structure was the real cause, and then the superstructure which followed. Now, you should have seen, for instance, that the Europeans had the same logic which belongs to the superstructure under slavery, under serfdom, and only in the middle of the bourgeois period, suddenly the logic was changed. Hegel's dialectic logic was the first logic since Aristotle. So things remain static in the superstructure, while underneath 3 times the economic system changed. So therefore, Bloch and all these people are aware that if one holds on to the superstructure base structure thing, that it has to be modified. That it is not synchronized so nicely as one may believe. Some things, but the main thing was, can also ideas, religious ideas or whatever, can they be causative, So did really all these Mennonites and left-wing Reformation particularly, did they bring about the new system or also the right, of course, because Protestant Reformation was particularly rooted in bourgeois circles in the cities, So Thomas Münzer, led the farmer. That was the fourth estate. So Thomas Münzer is not the predecessor of the bourgeois revolution, but rather of the socialistic revolution, and so he was repressed then by the churches, so that only then Engels wrote the first book about the farmer war, and that in the middle of the 19th century, when suddenly people heard about Münzer, and then Bloch, in the 20th century wrote about him. So it's amazing what you can do, because you had the Catholics who wanted to repress it, and you had the right wing of the Reformation, which are the Lutherans and the Zwinglians and the Calvinists on the right, and then the Anabaptists and so on. They had communism in Münster and exchange of women and common property and so on. So that was the Protestant left. And that froze now. They are now down there in Indiana,
Yes.
I just visited them in Ontario. Yeah.
Oh, that were the Anabaptists.
Yeah, right. But one thing you bring them from in here, and about his social personality, so social character, and that is his invention. He wrote the 20s and 30s, wrote 2 books about this, and they applied that when they had 8,000 workers and made this test, and they found out that between the 2 extremes, on one side the authoritarian personality, which was really the fascist personality, the bourgeois personality, on the other side the revolutionary personality, which was baptized this democratic personality, and that was used, by Adorno in 1950s, early with the labor unions, and it was used again for another thing, the authoritarian personality, the book which came out. And then it was used in Mexico City once more by Foreman and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So that is the issue there. And so that is what you refer to. So when we talk about the social character here, we have to know which one it is, and this authoritarian personality has certain characteristics. It's romantic, nationalistic, vocablistic, sadistic and masochistic, and sometimes also racist, but in different way. Hitler very much so, Mussolini less, Franco even less, and so on. So these are and why was that done? Because of predictability. They wanted to predict if Hitler would have a chance. They did in 1930, Hitler came into power in 1933. In order to have an authoritarian movement win, you have to know how many authoritarian personalities were there. It was never followed up, but I met always people, workers for instance, who were on the revolutionary side, but to different degrees. Some workers would make fun about Hitler, jokes, and so, which was often forbidden. Some of them would really, do sabotage. Some got into concentration camps, and I knew some of them. Some of them were released again from concentration camp because they behaved well and were sent home and had to swear that they would not say a word about the camps, and I knew some of these people too. And on the other side, you had people workers who became party leader. They were in the SA, not in the SS. SA was working class, SS was bourgeoisie. So, and then others, who did not have a function, but they walked around the uniform and so on. So sometimes there were maybe 12% were on this authoritarian thing, and maybe 10% or whatever were on the revolutionary side. But what was decisive, that was in the middle. The so-called middle people were not in the middle, but they were silent followers of the right, and silent people who gave Hitler their vote so that he came with 43% or whatever came into power then. So this is, that we fill this a little bit, what that is, this social character there. Okay, so otherwise very good paper. I have here, what else do I have here? So, this basis, most important for Weber is, the sociology of the sociologist. That means to which stratum he himself belongs and what he wanted to do. That means to say, yes, Marx, you're right, economic things are very important, but, and he has writings about this, but on the other hand, also ideas can make changes and so on. So the fundamental thing is in the interpretation of the Reformation was the gold which came from the Americas, which the Indians had to dig up there. Did that bring about the change from feudalism of capitalism, or was it the Luther's movement and the work ethics and so on? So that's for the beginning. Now at the end there, of course, that changed into an ideology. That means the teaching on vocation by Luther and the teaching on predestination, you talk about all this, that was the ideology for some times, but for quite some time, since the First World War at least, the system has taken the place of these religious ideologies.
Yes.
That means if you do not succeed, you get in the slums and you have no health insurance and hell is loose, and your life is not worth living. And so that is very impressive, and that takes the place of what once this religious motivation did. So, the ideas of vocation of Luther was that only to be a priest or a nun was really a role, an occupation which came from God for vocation and so on. And what he, while he was a deeply religious person, he had all the material of sainthood, he did promote at the same time, strangely enough and curiously enough, the secularization process, because also a farmer, and a banker and an industrialist could now be called by God, and it was a vocation as high as that of a priest, and at the same time he cancelled the priesthood, the sacrament of the priesthood. The Protestant ministers are not priests, they are, what they say, ministers. So, And there is a universal priesthood, but no special priesthood. So he did, in that sense, this idea, Weber would say, was very powerful and led to the victory of capitalism over feudalism. That would be different for Marx, but as he became older, he came closer to Marx again. And the same thing with the predestination idea. It was a deeply religious idea. There are roots for it in the New Testament, that we are predestined, by God's will for salvation or death condemnation. And Augustine has this very strongly, so Calvin took that up, and it was a very powerful idea in that sense, that it is not when you are rich, that doesn't mean that your wealth gets you into heaven, but it means only that it is a sign that you have been chosen to go to heaven if you are wealthy. And so I had this experience in New York where I drove, in the 50s with a very rich guy. We saw beggars in the rain, they were struggling who would sleep on the bench and who would be under the bench and so on. And he said to me, look, if God has forsaken them, what can we do about it? So that is really an ideological function. We don't have to deal with the poor, give them the milk powder, whatever, because, their fate, it is their fate. It's not society, it's not us. But fate has decided, that they will be condemned in all eternity, and that though they are poor on the bench is only a sign that this has happened to them. So the question is always, with the neurosis, for instance, a certain idea, what is it doing for this person? And so you can also say, what is this doing for a capitalistic society? Well, it's very helpful, because I have one chapter on New York, the capital of liberalism. While they built the skyscrapers on one side, they took all these islands, Blackwell Island and so on and so on, and Rikers Island, and made them into penal colonies and places for insane asylums. And I described, on insane asylum what that looked like, because Dickens had been there from London and described it really. So that's liberalism. On one side the winners are there, and then you have the losers. And the apologetics comes in when you take a boat today, and I took, maybe I visited the island again and again in order to be able to describe it all, He would say, well, this is where the poor live, and he would say, well, they're really poor, well, it's a horrible, horrible life, but control, but that doesn't help, But they are free, see, there you have it. That means what they have done here, and that is the pseudo-Mouton, the first and fundamental lie. They have taken a utopia, the freedom of all, have transformed it into an ideology by which they justify the freedom of the few. That is satanic. I mean, in terms of the Ayatollah, when he tells us Satan people, that is really satanic. And you take the hope, that in terms of freedom of all, the class and style of society and so on, and you change that around and make it into the justification of the exact opposite, namely the freedom of the few, who are living there. Besides these big, horrible places, there are these, $1 million apartments and so on. So you have it right there. I mean, it is satanic. So and I studied this, in the family by my children's relative, carpenter. He had to move. Every month he moved from one street of Manhattan to another street because he could not pay for the rent. And he did this for 8 years, and business cycle, no job for a whole year, and that made him poor. And at the same time, 4 children. So when the 4th child came, his wife, exploded and became mentally ill, and spent 19 years on Blackwell Island, with 1,500 poor German insane people who couldn't even speak the language. And the one journalist, in order to make some business for the newspaper, went into that insane asylum, played insane, and she went through the hospital and had 8 doctors looking at her, and they said she was insane. She came to the island, she was I wonder how many people who were completely sane just spoke another language. They considered them to be insane. I mean, hell through and through, And you go into the detail. And why Dickens got there was because there was an octagon building which they have now made into the heart of a luxury apartment. I went in there too. They reconstructed the whole thing with these turning staircases going up and a wonderful dome on top. And Dickens could not even go into those buildings, so horrible. These people screamed, and then they had no clothing for winter, no winter clothing, so they were freezing all the time. When they said they didn't have enough to eat, they said, "You're a charity, what do you expect?" and so on. They had one bath a week, and that was cold, even in winter. It's just unbelievable thing. Or then they put women together and rented them out, as babysitters and whatever, and made money from them. The prisoners on the same island took care of those insane women. When Dickens was there, the doctors played around with the nurses there and forgot completely that they had patients. I mean, and it's interesting that Dickens does not blame the governor of the island. He blames the liberal establishment of New York. After these journalists had a hard time, to get out again, of course, of the whole thing, and its armies of lawyers had to get her out again, and then she wrote one article after the other about the whole thing. That's how I got into it, so to find out about these things, but it's all hidden, I went into the history of Rikers Island, which is the biggest penal colony now in the universe, And I went as far as I could, with a boat in order to see. You cannot get on the island because they cannot protect you from the prisoners, so you have no entrance to it. So I took a boat and drove around. So that is liberalism. Walter, this is very good. I give it back to you.
Thank you.
And you take that for Dustin too, right?
Yes.
Okay, now here we have
Where's
the test.
Dustin? Okay.
Let me give you this test. And now we don't have much time for this because I need it on Monday night. You can either put it into my mailbox in the Warhol, or you can also bring it here or put it into the mailbox, wherever it's more comfortable to you. But I have to have it on Monday because I have to give you a grade on Tuesday. Because
what time do you want it? When are you going to pick it up if they put it in your
in the
office?
evening. I go into my office in the evening, Monday evening, and pick it up. So I would have to have it all on Monday evening, and then I need you in order to put the grades in, right?
Yes, on
You
Tuesday.
can do on Tuesday evening, maybe.
Yes.
So it takes the whole day longer to do this. So now take this in a very relaxed way. First of all, you wrote beautiful papers already, right? I have all the grades for you already, and they are beautiful grades. So what you can do is, extend that what you have done is one way. I mean, you have the two options again. You can, answer some of these questions here. That would be a simple thing. You can answer something about the movie or something about contemporary issues, or you can take the book which you read already and maybe add something to it, maybe your own reflections or so. But do it in a very relaxed way because you have all your good grades already. Right? But we are obligated to have these tests. So, okay. Now let's look at some of these questions there, and please answer critically 8 out of the following 61 questions essay form, or write the 8-page. Well, that is not really true neither. It doesn't have to be 8 questions. Essay
big
answer that for your grandchildren in order to show them how you suffered. And related heuristically, that means it should help you to ask questions to some of the other questions. Please keep the questionnaire and add it to your notes. Okay, so. Well, let's go through some of these questions. How much time do we still have? Because we want to look at the movie too there.
How much
Huh?
How much of the movie do we have left? He just said
I don't know exactly, but we want to have a little bit of time for it.
Okay, do you want us just to pick questions?
You could do that, or I could just take the first and second one. Let me take the first and second one, and then you can tell me one that you would like to. How much time do we have still?
We have 24 minutes, yes?
So let's do 4 minutes here. What is fascism? How has it influenced the life and the work of Habermas, Honneth, and Lubille, and other younger critical theorists? And I mentioned a few here. McCarthy, and Ott, and Goldstein, and Siebert, and Best, and Kellner, and Thompson, and Held. And when you look into those books, you will have armies of them. So I don't even Joas, and Habib, and Fraser, and so on. So I don't mention any further, and I don't repeat them again in any of these questions, but only etc., 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 so you can tell you whatever you want to. So now, of course, it played a great role for the first generation. But does it still play a role for the second generation, for Habermas and so on? Yes, it does. I think the whole work after the war of Habermas could not be understood without his opposition to that what his father and son, what they were involved in spite of the fact that he was not in the army anymore, he was too young and was not participating in it, but the whole Jewish thing, the whole anti-Semitism thing and so on was very important. So they were tremendous. One cannot understand the critical theory without fascism. And so this has not lost its actuality when the right-wingers say, we may go to fascism. We may follow, Argentina's example, and we may also follow the example of Venezuela or so. So it can go both ways, and that is important why these critical theorists should get on the ball and should also find ways, to become active in one way or the other. What is anti-Semitism or anti-Judaism? That's also a core of the first generation. But it remains also in the second and third generation. Studies of right-wing extremism and forms of racism have been done in the Institute in Frankfurt. Mike Ott will visit the Institute, and he hopes, to be able at least to go there for a few weeks. He will live in my apartment, which I own in Frankfurt, and he, then can visit there. It would be very good for him to say that he was at the source once. So, what role does it play in Habermas's and Hones's critical theory of society? Throughout his career, the whole struggle of Habermas against the revisionists in England and in Germany who wanted to revise the whole thing of Holocaust deniers and so on. So the writings of Habermas, Dubil and so on are very intense on all of this. They have developed a theory, and we discussed that already, I can say very shortly. That means that they believe that anti-Semitism is rooted fundamentally in the inability of the Hebrews to give up the nomadic life, and that therefore they remained nomads, moving besides the Euphrates and Tigris civilization on one side, where Abraham came from Ur, which is not too far away from Baghdad, and on the other side, the Nile civilization. And so in between, and for the people who had started to work there, maybe 10,000 years before Christ, but certainly 4,000 years when villages were built, out of the villages came the city-state, so people had to do agriculture. Agriculture is the first form of real disciplined work. And the people who looked at the nomads with their camels, they are moving from place to place, for them who did not have to work, they didn't have to work. And this motif, that they live somehow paradisical life while the others have to sweat and so on, produced in people a resentment against them as nomads. And this resentment is strong in Egypt. They don't eat with the Hebrews in Egypt, and no intermarriage. And the same thing is then also the Babylonian captivity and so on the other side. So that makes them, in a strange way, a chosen people. But the unbelievable irrational hate through centuries and civilizations has to be explained somehow. And their explanations, Adorno's theory is that nomadic thing. And this, as it is in the symphony, you have a theme and then you have variations. So that theme has variations, and so sometimes it is that monotheism, and sometimes it's that they are Christ killers, that they are God killers, and finally that they are not the right biology, that they don't have the right gene source, and that they, something is biologically wrong with them, or they are inferior or parasitic, etc. But these are the variations, and these variations are as irrational. For instance, to say that the Jews do not work after they have pushed them out of all work. They could not belong to the guilds for 1,000 years, and so they didn't have any work. Therefore, they were pushed into circulation, and bought the little pigs from the farmers and sold them for 10 cents more in the market, and therefore developed the first form of capitalism. Then gave loans to the workers and farmers, and they didn't know about interest counting and so on. So then they got the idea that they were cheating and made the cows heavier by water, and then the cows lost the water afterwards and were only half their weight. And all these things were then feeding into, this backlash in Germany after the Jews, 100 years after the Jews had, or 200 years even, had been emancipated and became assimilated, and so on. Suddenly comes this horrible backlash, which has biological elements, sometimes still religious elements, and this horrible attempt to make a Jew-free Europe, a Jew-free globe, if they could have done it, and so on. And no repentance, no regret by Hitler or anybody around him. That was a good thing which they did. By the way, do you know there's a guy here, I think a Polish guy, who was to be deported yesterday to Munich, to the German administration of justice, and his son said that this would, since the father is very fragile, he is now 89 years old, that he would, that would be amount to torture, and a very torture-sensitive American administration stopped it. He was not brought to Germany. The whole thing has to start out.
He was a guard at Sobibor.
Yeah, a guard, and it's 22,000 charges or whatever.
Yeah, because Sobibor was the only concentration camp where the Jews and the Russians got together and broke free, and 300 of them escaped. And then they closed the camp. No, Sobibor.
Okay. Well, there must have been two camps when they did this. Okay, someday we will know the truth about these things as well, I hope. So, nevertheless, it's reaching right into our present situation now. What they want to do with this 89-year-old guy who cannot remember anything anymore, that's not entirely clear. So, but nevertheless, okay. So that, as far as the question number 2 is concerned, and so you can.
Sounds about right.
It's
Yeah.
the same guy from the 80s?
Yeah. He's still
I didn't know. It's still
There's no end to this. Okay, do we have any other question about this? Anything else you would like me to discuss?
Now we'll send you emails. How's that?
Send you emails. We'll bug you on email.
Yeah, okay. So can you handle it?
So your mailbox is in Moore Hall?
Yeah, where's
the Moore Hall on the second floor.
Second floor?
Religion department, yeah.
And you'll be there by what?
I will be there by 6 o'clock.
Okay.
But you can, all day long, you can put it in there. Or, if you want to, you can put it here in the mailbox. Okay? Very good. Let's have the movie there. And why did we have that movie? Because we want to look at the Baptist context once more.
You think I've left Center Hall? I have no idea where Moore Hall is.
Don't feel bad. I only know where Stangren is, and I know where Dunbar is,
I know all
and I know where...
You know that I know all these people still? Friedman was a little Jew who left Germany under the Nazi thing, and he founded the religion department, or helped to, and was in the history department, and became a Mennonite. But he did not really convert to the Mennonites. He only loved the Mennonites, and he bought books and gave his whole huge library to the Mennonites in Japan, of all places. Now, he was a tiny little Jew and a wonderful, friendly person. So that is one of them. The other, Dunbar, was a historian who studied the American railroad system, was a specialist for the railroad system. Yeah. And then Miller, of course, he hired me. Miller Auditorium. Boy, I knew them all.
68 you came here?
65.
65.
Does anyone remember where we are?
Can you remember still?
Oh, what did we see last?
I think she was in prison, right?
The false confession?
Yeah, I think we have the false confession.
Yeah, we definitely
All right,
did.
let me run on the way. Please take your chair.
Wir schweigen nicht. Wir sind euer böses Gewissen. Die Geiste Runde ist euch keine Ruhe.
Here, pass this.
Wer ist hier?
Okay, should we turn off the light or make it a little dim it down? Just turn that a little bit there. Yeah. Okay. So is
I think we're before this is too far.
Just stop anyway.
Okay.
This is a tender moment.
Tender moment. That was good. You're beating his head in with a brick.
Warum wollen Sie uns denn dann überhaupt bestrafen?
Weil das Gesetz das verboten. Ohne Gesetz keine Ordnung.
Das Gesetz, auf das Sie sich berufen, hat schon der Machtergreifung 1933 auf das freie Wort geschützt. Und jetzt bestraft es unser Hitler das freie Wort mit dem Zuchthaus oder dem Tod. Das hat es mit Ordnung zu tun.
Woran soll man sich denn sonst halten, wenn nicht an das Gesetz? Egal, wer es erlassen hat.
Auf Ihr Gewissen.
Was? Hier ist das Gesetz. Und hier sind die Menschen. Und ich als Kriminalist habe die Pflicht zu prüfen, ob beides...
He a criminologist, that's what he is.
Horrible people.
Kramer, he's like Kramer.
Oh, boo!
Wo kommen wir
Give him my love.
Selbst wenn es Verbrechen gelingen würde, den Führer zu stürzen, was wäre denn dann? Zwangsläufig
See, this is the conservative thing. What will happen after the system is destroyed?
Da wissen wir doch, wo er hinführt.
Ohne Hitler und eine Partei gibt es endlich wieder Recht und Ordnung für jeden. Und den Schutz des Einzelnen vor Willkür. Nicht nur für die Mitläufer.
Willkür, Mitläufer. Wollen Sie dazu so abhängig reden?
Sie sind abhängig. Wenn Sie mich und meinen Bruder wie ein paar Flugler der Verbrecher nennen. Wo wir nichts anderes machen, als mit Worten zu überzeugen versuchen.
Sie mit Ihren Privilegien, die Sie um Ihre Sippschaft schamlos ausnutzen. Sie dürfen von unserem Geld mit dem Krieg studieren. Ich durfte in der verdammten Demokratie nur
All the studies were free as the fascists.
Polizisten gemacht hat. Der Franzose in der gesetzten Fall, nicht die deutschen Demokraten. Wenn die Bewegung nicht gewesen wäre, ich wäre heute noch Landgendarm in Pirmasens. Scheußlich kann schon das sein.
Firma.
Die Arbeitslosigkeit, die wirtschaftliche Not, das alles hat unser Führer Adolf Hitler beseitigt.
Hitler gave 7 million people jobs in 1934. They thought he was the Messiah.
Sie bekommen dieselben Lebensmittelkarten wie wir, die Menschen, die sie verachten und bekämpfen. Ihnen geht es doch sowieso besser als unser einer.
He comes from the middle bourgeoisie, he comes from the low bourgeoisie, like all Nazis. There is a resentment against studied people, educated people.
Unsere deutschen Soldaten befreien Europa von der Plutokratie und vom Bolschewismus. Großes, freies Deutschland.
It's something between capitalism and socialism.
Dass der Krieg zu Ende ist und wieder fremde Truppen einmarschieren und alle Völker auf uns weisen und sagen, wir haben Hitler widerstandslos ertragen.
Was sagen Sie, wenn der Endsieg errungen ist? Und nach all dem Blut und Leid, Wohlstand und Freiheit in Deutschland einziehen, wovon Sie selber geträumt haben, als Sie den BDM beigetreten sind?
She was Hitler used
Wir
good.
glauben, daran haben in Hitlers Deutschland alle verloren.
Wenn es doch so kommt, wie schade. Sie sind doch Protestantin.
Ja.
Comes religion.
Die Kirche fordert doch auch, dass die Gläubigen ihr folgen, auch wenn sie zweifeln.
Yeah, here all power comes from God. This is a very unhappy statement by Paul.
Warum gehen Sie für falsche Ideen so jung wie Sie sind ein derartiges Risiko ein?
He really wants to help her somehow, but she cannot be helped.
Wegen meines Gewissens.
That's a good Protestant answer.
Ich kann nicht verstehen, dass Sie mit Ihren Gaben nicht nationalsozialistisch denken und fühlen. Freiheit, Ehre, Wohlstand, sittlich verantwortliche Staatswesen, das ist unsere Gesinnung.
Was Ihnen denn nicht auch das furchtbare Blutbad, das die Nationalsozialisten im Namen von Freiheit und Ehre in ganz Europa angerichtet haben, die Augen geöffnet? Der deutsche Name bleibt für immer geschändet, wenn nicht endlich die deutsche Jugend Hitler entmachtet und hilft, ein neues geistiges Europa zu errichten.
Das neue Europa kann nur nationalsozialistisch sein.
Und wenn ihr für ein Wahnsinniger ist, denken Sie doch bloß an den Rassenhass. Es hat bei uns in Ulm einen jüdischen Lehrer gegeben, den man vor eine SA-Gruppe gestellt hat. Und alle muss man ihm vorbeiziehen und auf Befehl ihm ins Gesicht spucken. Und in der Nacht ist er dann verschwunden. Wie seit 41 hier in München-Tausende. Angeblich im Arbeitseinsatz im Osten.
She knows a little bit about the camps.
Die Juden wandern aus. Und selber.
Soldaten, die aus dem Osten kommen, erzählen schon lange von Vernichtungslagern. Hitler will auch die Juden in ganz Europa ausrotten. Diesen Wahnsinn hat er schon vor 20 Jahren geprägt.
Truth is with her.
Ich kann nicht glauben, dass die Juden andere Menschen sein sollen wie wir.
Dieses Wort hat uns nur Unglück gebracht. Aber Sie gehören zu einer verwirrten Jugend, die nichts versteht. Falsche Erziehung. Wahrscheinlich sind wir selber daran schuld. Ich hätte ein Mädel wie Sie anders erzogen.
Was glauben Sie, wer entsetzlich war, als ich erfahren habe, dass die Nationalsozialisten geisteskranke Kinder mit Gas und Gift beseitigt haben?
Sie
Ich habe
knows that
Freundinnen
truth.
unserer Mutter erzählt.
It was in Hadamar in
Kinder bei
Hessen.
den Diakoninnen in der Pflegeanstalt des Lastwagen abgeholt wurden. Da haben die übrigen Kinder gefragt, wo die Wagen hinfahren. Die fahren in den Himmel, haben die Schwestern gesagt. Da sind dann die übrigen Kinder singend in die Wagen gestiegen. Glauben Sie, ich bin falsch erzogen, weil ich mich idealistisch fühle?
Das ist lebenswert zu leben.
Unworthy who
Das
judges
ist
it.
das gelernt. Da sind Ihnen doch auch Geisteskranke begegnet.
Ja, und deswegen weiß ich genau, dass kein Mensch, egal unter welchen Umständen, ein Recht hat, ein Urteil zu fällen, das allein Gott vorbehalten ist. Niemand kann wissen, was in der Seele eines Geisteskranken vor sich geht. Niemand weiß, welches geheime innere Reifen aus Leid entstehen kann. Jedes Leben ist kostbar.
Sie müssen sich daran gewöhnen, dass eine neue Zeit angebrochen ist. Sie sagen, hat mit der Realität nichts zu tun.
But it's reality.
Das hat natürlich mit der Wirklichkeit zu tun. Jetzt bitte, Moral und Gott.
Gott gibt es nicht.
Oh.
The Nazis were not atheists, really.
Well, this one is.
I wonder if he believes all that stuff which he says there.
Ist es denn nicht so gewesen, dass Sie sich auf Ihren Bruder verlassen haben? Dass es richtig war, was er getan hat. Und dass Sie einfach nur mitgemacht haben.
He wants to rescue
Sollen wir
her.
das nicht noch ins Protokoll aufnehmen?
Nein, der Mord, weil es nicht stimmt.
Sehen Sie, ich habe auch einen Sohn. Der ist sogar noch ein Jahr jünger als Sie. Er hat ja auch manchmal Flausen im Kopf. Aber jetzt steht er an der Ostfront, weil er eingesehen hat, dass er seine Pflicht tun muss.
Oh, that ugly word.
Glauben Sie denn noch an den Enzika-Mord?
Toll, wenn Sie das alles bedacht hätten. Sie hätten sich doch nie zu solchen Handlungen hinreißen lassen. Es geht um Ihr Leben.
He really wants to help.
Hier,
If he
für
could.
das Protokoll halte ich Ihnen Folgendes vor. Sind Sie nach unseren Aussprachen zur Auffassung gekommen, dass Ihre Handlungsweise gemeinsam mit Ihrem Bruder gerade in der jetzigen Phase des Krieges als ein Verbrechen gegenüber der Gemeinschaft, insbesondere aber unserer im Osten schwer und hart kämpfenden Truppen anzusehen ist, das die schärfste Verurteilung finden muss?
Nein, von meinem Standpunkt aus nicht.
Einen Fehler einzugestehen heißt nicht, seinen Bruder zu verraten.
Wohl aber die Idee.
He still wants to
Ich
get
würde es
her.
genauso wieder machen, wenn nicht ich, sondern Sie haben die falsche Weltanschauung. Ich bin nach wie vor der Meinung, dass ich das Beste für mein Volk getan habe. Ich bereue das nicht. Ich will die Folgen dafür auf mich nehmen.
Protokollführerin zur Widerschrift. Ja. Sagen Sie dem Chef, wir sind dann fertig.
He knows exactly what will happen to her guillotine. He washes his hands in innocence, like Pilate.
Der Noah hat mir eine goldene Puppe gebaut, wenn ich von unserer Idee abschwöre. Und? Ich bin nicht darauf eingegangen. Warum nicht? Sophie, du bist noch so jung. Du musst für dich und eure Idee überleben. Und für deine Familie. Gib mir Gottes nahm sein Angebot an. Gibt kein Zurück.
Great little thing.
Or is this just your death drive taking over?
Yes, how many times I've read this. There was always the hope that if prison would be bombed, they would be opened up when they would leave. That is what the Christmas tree were called. You had to shoot the Christmas tree down, then they couldn't orientate themselves. They always had a little bit hope there that the Allies would come in time. One over two, remember?
Der Nazi kommt ist nicht schuld, sondern ein Christoph Tod. Auch wegen Hochverrat.
He was the friend who had a family.
Er hat 3 Kinder. Und das Jüngste ist heute ist geboren. Mit dem Kind.
Sie müssen jetzt zu Nummer klicken.
Did he say prosecutor?
So weiter.
His father will always
Hier ist eine Anklageschrift. Der Verhandlung ist morgen früh beim ersten Senat des Volksgerichtshofs hier in München. Schriftliche Daten habe ich beigefügt.
Warum schon?
Die Sache duldet keinerlei Aufschub.
Reichling came even from Berlin for this event. He is the one who sentenced all the 1,200 who were involved in the assassination attempt.
Warum schon der Prozess?
They don't even have any time for defense to prepare.
Ein fertiger Sondervertrag.
Ich bin Rechtsanwalt Klein, Ihr Pflichtverteidiger. Haben Sie die Anklageschrift gelesen?
Ja,
Noch Fragen dazu?
das geschieht mit meinen Geschwistern und Eltern in Ulm.
Darüber wird ein Anwaltsstelle entschieden.
Ich will aber wissen, was passiert. Sie sind doch mein Anwalt.
Sie haben einen Ton in der Stimme, als wäre ich für Ihre Lage verantwortlich.
Mein Recht zu wissen, was mit meiner Familie passiert. Und Sie wissen das.
Glauben Sie, dass es Ihnen zusteht, Forderungen zu stellen?
Egal wie mein Bruder verurteilt wird. Ich will keine mildere Strafe bekommen. Ich bin genauso schuldig wie er, wenn das aus Ihrer Sicht betrachtet.
Ach, mehr haben Sie dazu nicht zu sagen. Nein. Sie und Ihr Bruder, Sie meinen wohl, Sie brauchen sich nicht in das Volksganze einzufügen. Aber da täuschen Sie sich.
Individual is under the nation.
Des Volksgerichtshofs, extra aus Berlin. Der treibt Ihnen die Glauben, hör auf, mein Fräulein. Der macht Sie und Ihren Herrn Bruder so klein mit Hut. Aufschließen.
What is defense?
Nein, nein. Wir sehen uns morgen im Bericht.
Now look at the court position now.
Das Reichsland hat morgen als gemeine Verbrecher hingestellt. Er war früher Sowjetkommissar.
He's the one who was a communist before, converted to National Socialism. He was hit by an American bomb and wounded and taken care of by a poisoned nun who took care of him, whose brother he had sentenced to death. That's how he ended up a few weeks later.
Ja, stimmt. Mit einem Schauprozess und
Last year it was in Leipzig where people's court was and the taxi drivers didn't even know anymore what it was.
In der Studentenschaft gibt es bestimmt eine Revolte, denn wir erfahren, was wegen ein paar Flugblättern passiert ist. Nach dem Prozess wirst du erstmal verlegt. Bis zum äußersten Grund. 99 Tage stehen jedem bis zur Vollstreckung zu.
She does not get the 99 days.
Ein weiches Herz, sagt mein Bruder. Träumt. Ich trage ein Kind in einem langen weißen Kleid in meinen Arm. Ich spüre seine Wärme. Plötzlich bewegt sich die Erde. Und direkt unter mir öffnet sich eine Gletscherspalte. Ich fange an zu rutschen. Ich schaue auf das Kind, aber gerade noch Zeit genug, es sanft auf die sichere Seite zu legen. Ich stürze, bin trotzdem erlöst und erleichtert. Das Kind im weißen Kleid ist unsere Idee. Und sie hat überlebt.
She is a believer and the other one is a communist.
Fertig machen, Bad. Die Frau muss sich jetzt richtig anziehen.
Danke.
They let prisoners taking care of prisoners. No, she's a believer anyway.
Vielen Dank.
Now look at this Weisler character. Ex-communist who has to prove that he is a real loyal National Socialist. something wrong with that swastika there. It's upside down.
Maybe they put it up backwards.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's what a Nazi court would look like.
A civilian in the room, huh?
Vorher, so schneller gebracht wird. Guck mal jetzt.
There he is. That's Mr. Feisler.
Herr Hitler!
Converts are always the most fanatic people.
Ich eröffne die Verhandlung des ersten Senats des Volksgerichtshofs gegen Hans-Fritz Scholl und Sophia Magdalena Scholl aus München sowie Christoph Hermann Probst aus Altland wegen Hochverrat, Wehrkraftersetzung und Feindbegünstigung. Probst, Christoph.
That is the French with his lead showing. He wants to get out of it.
Sie sind verheiratet und haben 3 Kinder? Ja, 40 Jahren und 1 und 4 Wochen. Und wie wollen Sie, ausgerechnet Sie Versager, 3 Kinder zu richtigen Deutschen erziehen? Ich bin ein guter Vater. Was? Und ein unpolitischer Mensch. Unpolitisch nennt er sich, das ist nicht klar. Das ist doch Ihre Schrift. Ja. Weder die Fürsorge des Nationalsozialistischen Reichs für ihre Berufsausbildung, noch die Tatsache, dass nur die nationalsozialistische Bevölkerungspolitik es ihnen ermöglicht haben, eine Familie als Student zu haben, hinderten sie daran, auf Aufforderung Scholz dieses Manuskript auszuarbeiten, das den Heldenkampf von Stalingrad zum Anlass nimmt, den Führer als militärischen Hochstapler zu beschimpfen und zur Kapitulation aufzufordern. Dann nehmen Sie dazu. Jawohl, aber es war doch nur ein Entwurf. Es gibt kein Nur im Überlebenskampf des deutschen Volkes. Aber ich möchte sagen, dass ich unter einer psychotischen Depression... Eine psychotische Depression?
Insanity.
Ich unter einer psychotischen Depression der Abfassung des Entwurfs gelitten habe. Der Krieg. Das Kindheitsfieber meiner Frau, die ja immer noch... Ach, hören Sie doch auf, das entschuldigt doch nicht einen solch üblen Verrat. Ich habe mich doch gestern schriftlich distanziert. Ich muss außerdem darauf bestehen, dass ich weder durch finanzielle Unterstützung, noch durch Materialbeschaffung, noch durch Anfertigung und Verbreitung von Schriften ein solches Unternehmen unterstützt habe. Meine seelische Verfassung war... Ja, mal gehört, dass Sie sich als psychopathischen Idioten aufgeben, um besser davon zu kommen. Herr Präsident, meine Kinder brauchen den Vater. So ein mieses Vorbild brauchen solche Kinder nicht. Sie sind doch unwürdig, Probst. Verteidigung, noch Fragen? Nein, Herr Präsident. Abführen.
Kangaroo court. Very good.
Pocket every. Pouch every.
That's right. Give me the thumbs.
Scholl, an. Sie studieren seit Frühjahr 1939 Medizin? Ja. Und zwar heute dank der Fürsorge der nationalsozialistischen Regierung im 8. Semester. 8. Semester ist richtig. Auf Kosten des Reiches. Auch noch so ein Schmarotzer. Zwischendurch waren sie im Frankreich-Feldzug in einem Feldlazarett und vom Juli bis November 1942 an der Ostfront im Sanitätsdienst. Auch das ist richtig, aber ich möchte sagen, dass nichts sagen Sie, bevor ich Sie frage. Ich will sagen, dass ich nicht als Schmarotzer... Halten Sie die Mund oder lassen Sie abführen! Als Soldat der Studentenkompanie ist Studium Pflicht. Ach, dann reden wir doch gleich mal über Pflicht. Als Student haben Sie die Pflicht zu vorbildlicher Gemeinschaftsarbeit. Das
Community, Solidarity versus Autonomy.
Hat Sie nicht gehindert. In der ersten Sommerhälfte 1942 4 Flugblätter der Weißen Rose zu verbreiten, die defetistisch Deutschlands Niederlage voraussagen, zum allgemeinen passiven Widerstand, der Sabotage in Rüstungsbetrieben und überhaupt bei jeder Gelegenheit dazu auffordern, dem deutschen Volk seine nationalsozialistische Lebensart und seine Regierung zu nehmen. Scheu, geben Sie dazu? Ja. Und Ihre Schwester haben Sie da feige mit hineingezogen.
Das war meine Entscheidung.
Habe ich Sie gefragt, Angeklagte?
Ich muss das richtig stellen.
Verschonen Sie uns mit Ihren Kommentaren. Haben Sie diese Flugblätter geschrieben, weil Sie sich einbilden, dass das deutsche Volk nur durch Verrat am Führer durch den Krieg kommen könne? Ja oder nein? Das kann ja nicht so schwer sein. Gegen Amerika, England und Russland haben wir keine Chance. Blicken Sie doch nur mal auf die Landkarte. Hitler führt das deutsche Volk mit mathematischer Sicherheit in den Abgrund. Er kann den Krieg nicht mehr gewinnen, er kann ihn nur noch verlängern. Da täuschen Sie sich aber gewaltig über den Kampfeswillen und das Durchhaltevermögen des deutschen Volkes. Durch Ihre terroristische Feindbegünstigung werden noch die deutschen Soldaten sterben. Nur wer den Krieg jetzt schnell beendet, verhindert, Sie könnten über Krieg und Frieden entscheiden. Das ganze deutsche Volk will den totalen Krieg. Das deutsche Volk ist ausgeblutet und es wird Frieden. Hitler und seine Helfer sind schuld an einer unglaublichen Metzelei in Europa, die jedes Maß unendlich überschreitet. Jeder hier weiß. Ja, was bilden Sie sich denn ein? Die ehrlose Hund habe das die Frechheit, vor Gericht den Führer zu beschimpfen. Ich war anstrengend. Viele der Zuhörer. Sie nicht. Ich habe Ströme von Blut in Polen und in Russland mit eigenen Augen sehen müssen. Ich habe sehen müssen, wie Frauen und Kinder von deutschen Soldaten erschossen wurden. Ja, sind Sie denn so blöde, dass Sie annehmen können, dass auch nur ein einziger Volksgenosse Ihnen das glaubt? Wenn Hitler und Sie nicht Angst vor unserer Meinung hätten, würden wir hier nicht stehen. Ach, halten Sie auf den Mund! Das ist doch so nicht so! Ehrloser Lump! Die sind doch nur ein Dummkopf und ein Niederverräter! Ende der Verlegung! Noch Fragen? Nein. Keine Frage. Schulhans, zurück in die Bank. Sophia Scholl.
That needed a lot of courage to go there.
Schämen Sie sich denn nicht, dass die Flugblätter hochverräterischen Inhalts in der Universität verbreitet haben?
Nein, ich schäme mich nicht.
In den Licht hochgeworfen, einfach so.
Ist einfach so. Sondern noch die letzten...
Gehen Sie lauter, man kann Sie ja kaum verstehen.
Ich wollte auch noch die letzten Flugblätter verbreiten, damit unsere Idee so schnell wie möglich...
Diesen Dreck hier Ideen nennen, das sieht Vollidioten ähnlich, aber nicht deutschen Studenten.
Du kämpfst mit dem Wort.
Da schreiben Sie doch tatsächlich. Darum trennt euch von dem nationalsozialistischen Untermenschentum. Schauen Sie sich das selber an, da sehen Sie den Untermenschen. Wo haben Sie eigentlich das Papier für diese Pamphlete her?
Gekauft aus der Universität.
So, aus der Universität. Ein typischer Diebstahl von Volksgut. Papier, gerade Papier, das so knapp ist. Das sieht natürlich Hochverrätern ähnlich.
Mein Bruder und ich haben versucht, mit den Flugblättern den Menschen die Augen zu öffnen. Das furchtbare Blutbad an anderen Völkern und den Juden vorher zu beenden, als es ohnehin von den Alliierten beendet wird. Soll denn noch ewig das vor aller Welt ausgestoßene und verhackte Volk sein?
Ah, ein Herrenvolk interessiert das nicht.
Ihr Herrenvolk will in Wirklichkeit Frieden. Dass die Menschenwürde wieder Achtung findet. Ich will Gott, Gewissen, Mitgefühl.
Ja, bilden Sie sich denn ein? Der totale Krieg bringt den deutschen Volk in Sieg. Und es wird aus diesen Stahlrückern groß und gereinigt hervorgehen.
Was wir gesagt und geschrieben haben, das denken ja so viele. So wagen Sie nicht, es auszusprechen.
Ah, schweigen Sie endlich. Fragen? Ende der Beweisaufnahme abführen. So, nun kommen wir noch zu den Schlussworten der Angeklagten. Prost. Ich bin der Vater. Entfernen Sie diese Leute aus dem Saal. Ich bin nur der Vater von der Angeklagten. Ich will etwas zur Verteidigung. Das gestatte ich nicht. Entfernen. Raus hier. Rausbringen. Es gibt noch eine andere Gerechtigkeit. Bruder. Jetzt die Schlussworte. Die Angeklagten aufstehen. Prost!
Ich bitte Sie um mein Leben wegen meiner Kinder. Ich war im vollen Umfang ständig.
Und Sie, Scholl?
Ich bitte Sie, Hohes Gericht, verschonen Sie diesen Mann und bestrafen Sie mich.
Wenn Sie für sich selbst nichts vorzubringen haben, dann schweigen Sie gefälligst. Sophia Scholl.
Dann werden Sie hier stehen, wo wir jetzt stehen.
Jeder anständige Mensch hier im Saal ist empört über das, was Sie sagen.
It doesn't know yet that a bomb related to it.
Im Namen des deutschen Volkes, in der Strafsache gegen den Hans-Fritz Scholl aus München, die Sophia Magdalena Scholl aus München und den Christoph Hermann Probst aus Altland hat der erste Senat des Volksgerichtshofs aufgrund der Hauptverhandlung vom 22. Februar 1943 für Recht erkannt. Die Angeklagten haben im Kriege in Flugblättern zur Sabotage der Rüstung und zum Sturz der nationalsozialistischen Lebensform unseres Volkes aufgerufen, defetistische Gedanken propagiert und den Führer auf das Gemeiste beschimpft und dadurch den Feind des Reiches begünstigt und unsere Wehrkraft zersetzt. Sie werden deshalb mit dem Tode bestraft. Ihre Bürgerehre haben sie für immer verwirrt. Sie tragen die Kosten des Verfahrens. Euer Terror ist bald vorbei.
Heute hinter uns. Und morgen werdet ihr es sein.
Abführen! Heilig!
I think it's only a few minutes, 15 minutes. there. Unique. I think they brought her to another prison where they are ready for the death chapter.
Falls Sie noch Abschiedsworte finden, fassen Sie sich bitte kurz. War nicht schuld. Bitte noch. Ich dachte, in 99 Tagen hat jeder. Ich weiß nicht.
They want to do it fast. Sophia saying fights in Eastern Europe, Russia.
Kommen Sie. Sie haben noch Besuch. Besuch?
Parents.
Es ist auch richtig. Ich würde alles genauso wieder machen.
Das war alles richtig. Ich bin stolz auf mich.
So tapfer und gut bei mir steht. Sie muss also in jetzt unsere Ziffer reinkommen. Bis in unsere Ewigkeit wieder. Jesus. Jesus. Ja. Du auch. War nicht schuld. Bitte.
is the criminologist.
Ich habe mich gerade von meinen Eltern verabschiedet. Sie werden verstehen. Komm.
Mein Name ist Byrd. Ich bin der Gefängnisgeistliche.
Mein Gott, herrlicher Vater, verwandle du diesen Boden in eine gute Erde, damit dein Samen nicht umsonst hinfällt. Lasse wenigstens die Sehnsucht wachsen nach dir, ihrem Schöpfer, die sie so oft nicht mehr sehen will. Amen.
Amen.
Bitte sie um den Segen Gottes.
Segne dich, Gott, der Vater, der dich nach seinem Ebenbild geschaffen hat. Segne dich, Gott, der Sohn, der dich durch sein Leiden und Sterben erlöst hat. Segne dich, Gott, der Heilige Geist, der dich zu seinem Tempel bereitet und geheiligt hat. Der dreieinige Gott sei dir gnädig im Gericht, bewahre dich zum ewigen Leben. Amen. Niemand hat größere Liebe, denn der sein Leben lässt für seine Freunde. Gott ist bei dir.
They even have the suits out of old bourgeois executioners. They have to lift them up now to the guillotine.
No hanging?
No, they imitate the French Revolution, the left wing of the French Revolution. That's where the Nazis come from.
Die Sonne scheint noch.
It's still there, the guillotine. It's a table where they were put on.
Justiz hat mit seinem Erlass vom 22.02.1943 beschlossen, von seinem Begnadigungsrecht keinen Gebrauch zu machen, sondern der Gerechtigkeit den freien Lauf zu lassen. Es ist genau 17 Uhr. Die Vollstreckung ist durchzuführen. Durch Helmut von Moltke gelangt das 6. Flugblatt der Weißen Rose über Skandinavien nach England. Millionenfach wird es von alliierten Flugzeugen Mitte 1943 über Deutschland abgeworfen. Es ist jetzt überschrieben: ein deutsches Flugblatt, Manifest der Münchner Studenten.
So, now you know what the critical theory is about, to remember those people.